Of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. I will be with you for the next 3 hours, but here's what's on the menu this hour. Just Stop Oil targeted the Crucible yesterday. I want to know whether or not these are posh, spoilt brats targeting working-class people. In other news, the Welsh Government is planning to give asylum seekers £1,600 a month and potential legal aid as well. 1,600 quid, that is double, roughly, the state pension. What do you make of that? A few migrant stories floating about today. We'll give you the rest on that. And now, a judge has named a teenager, 15 years old now, who murdered another teenager. Should kids who kill be named, or is it against their human rights? And finally, a little bit of light relief for you, I think, ladies and gentlemen. So this quiche is going to be on the menu for the Coronation, but we've been putting together our own menu about what we think should be served up on the big day, and I want your suggestions as well. All of that and more coming your way with me, Patrick Christys. Loads to get in touch about today. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Do you think that Just Stop Oil are potentially quite self-entitled poshos who might be attacking the working class? Snooker, of course, a working class sport, traditionally, isn't it? Get your views coming in about that. The Kids Who Kill one, I think, as well, is interesting for you. Do you think that teenagers who commit horrendous crimes should actually be publicly named? And, of course, again, a little bit of light relief. I want your suggestions, novel ideas only, please, about what should be on the Coronation menu. I've put mine together. I want to hear yours. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, though, headlines with Sam Zim.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 2 minutes past 3. The SNP treasurer has been arrested by police investigating the party's finances. Colin Beattie is the second person to be questioned by detectives who are trying to establish how more than £600,000 in donations set aside for an independence referendum had been used. Earlier this month, the Scottish National Party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, was questioned for more than 11 hours. Mr Murrell, who's the husband of former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, was released without charge pending further investigation. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Ashworth told us it's time for change.
What we've seen is jaw-dropping, isn't it? And if the people of Scotland want a change of direction, which I think they actually do, I think it's pretty clear to me now that they need to come and support, and they will support, the Labour Party in Scotland as we rebuild across the country, because people are fed up of 13 years of Conservative rule and they're fed up of 13 years plus of SNP rule.
Labour is demanding transparency, calling on the Prime Minister to publish his financial interests today. Parliament's ethics watchdog is investigating whether Rishi Sunak failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major announcement in last month's budget. She holds shares in Coru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to recruit more childminders. Number 10 says Mr Sunak will clarify why it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, wants the PM to come clean.
I think transparency really does matter, and the Prime Minister did promise transparency and integrity, and so he does have to clear this up and declare what his interest is. The ministerial register has not been published for nearly a year, so I think for the Prime Minister today, he should publish his part of the register, clear this up and be open about this issue.
A US journalist has lost his appeal against his detention in Russia. Evan Gershkovich will be held in a Moscow prison until at least the 29th of May on charges of espionage. Mr Gershkovich, who works for the Wall Street Journal, is accused of trying to obtain military secrets on behalf of Washington and faces a possible 20-year sentence if convicted. The newspaper says the charges are a vicious affront to a free press. Speaking outside the court, the US ambassador to Russia, Lynn Tracy, called for his immediate release.
I can report that he is in good health and remains strong despite his circumstances. We will continue to provide all appropriate support to Evan and his family, and we expect Russian authorities to provide continued consular access to Evan. The charges against Evan are baseless, and we call on the Russian Federation to immediately release him.
More machetes and zombie knives could be banned in England and Wales, with criminals who buy or sell them facing up to 2 years in jail. Under plans, police could also be given new powers to seize and destroy weapons. Home Office Minister Chris Philp told GB News the move would make communities safer.
It will be a criminal offence to manufacture, supply, import or possess these dangerous knives in private. There's no reason to have these knives, no legitimate use. They are only used by criminals to intimidate and threaten the public, or indeed to engage in inter-gang warfare. That's why we're taking decisive action today to make these dangerous knives illegal.
The Energy Secretaries welcomed new rules banning energy suppliers from forcibly installing prepayment meters in the homes of customers over the age of 85 who live alone. Regulator Ofgem temporarily stopped the practice in February after it emerged a British gas subcontractor was breaking into people's homes to fit them. Suppliers across England, Scotland and Wales have agreed to a new code of practice to protect vulnerable customers. Under new rules, technicians will also be required to wear body cameras and audio equipment. The UK's rate of unemployment has risen and job vacancies have fallen for the 9th month in a row. Data from the Office for National Statistics show the unemployment rate rose to 3.8% in the 3 months to February. That's up from 3.7% in the previous 3 months. Meanwhile, job vacancies fell to 1.1 million in the 3 months to March. Free-range eggs are returning to shelves with restrictions to prevent the spread of bird flu, which has been lifted. From today, hens, which have been kept indoors since November, are now allowed to roam freely again. The government says the bird flu risk levels have been reduced to medium. Experts say despite the relaxation of restrictions, the disease still exists in the wild bird population. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
Good afternoon, everybody. Now, we start with Just Stop Oil's latest stunt. The activists who caused havoc at last night's Snooker World Championships in a full-time student who just 2 weeks ago told GB News that he opposes having children on, quote, moral grounds. Eddie Whittingham invaded the playing area at Sheffield's Crucible Theatre and covered one of the snooker tables in orange paint powder. Whittingham was wearing a T-shirt with the slogan "Just Stop Oil" as he interrupted the match between Robert Milkins and Joe Perry. I last spoke to Eddie Whittingham on March the 31st, and I think we can play a little clip of what he had to say. I am just keen to know, what do you want to do after university? What's your big ambition? What kind of line of work are you going to go into?
My dream is to be a writer, but any vocation, any dream is looking precarious if we don't sort out the climate crisis.
So are you genuinely so fearful that the world is going to end within your lifetime that you don't care particularly about future employment prospects or anything like that? You are just so convinced that you're going to see the end of the world?
Well, I already have decided that I won't be having children because I can't guarantee that there will be a habitable planet for them to grow up into.
OK, is that a difficult decision for you? I mean, that's quite a bold decision to make, isn't it?
Well, I think it's the moral choice, given the circumstances that we're facing.
So morally, you think it would be wrong to bring more children into this world?
If we don't sort out the climate crisis.
OK, so there we go. That was Eddie, and he, last night, was at the Crucible. Joining me now is Just Stop Oil activist Alex de Koning. Alex, thank you very much. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having a young climate scientist like myself on to talk about the climate crisis.
That's all right, absolutely. So, look, firstly, why the Crucible?
Well, as I say, I want to talk about the climate crisis. Like, I know you always want to talk on the specifics of protests and completely ignore the bigger problems at stake here. The fact that last year it was so hot that crops literally went on fire, and how it's predicted in just 10 years' time, the summer we had last summer at 40 degrees is going to become an average summer. These are the things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about how new oil and gas is what's causing this, and how it's insane that we're still pushing through a new coal mine, the first one in 30 years, when renewables are 9 times cheaper, our energy bills could be lower, and we could be creating so many more jobs by switching to renewable energies. Please tell me why you think we shouldn't.
No, I don't necessarily think you shouldn't at all, and I hope that you do feel heard. You have just been able to come on national television and outline exactly what you desire and what you think everyone should agree with. The main reason why I asked about the cruise...
I appreciate being able to do that, Patrick, but sadly, if it wasn't for actions like this, the climate science wouldn't be talked about.
I get the purpose. I get that. Having demonstrations, etc., leads public discourse, and we have chats like this, and I understand that, OK? And I am all for protest, by the way. I do have a question about the Crucible specifically, and it is around this. I'm keen to get your views on it, if that's all right, which is snooker is traditionally a working-class man and woman's sport, really. And I've spoken to Eddie before on the show, and he's told me that he's got a student loan now. He doesn't particularly see a future of paying that back, for example. Phoebe Plummer, for example, as well, has been on, and she reportedly has, received a remarkably good education at a fee-paying school and all of this. And I just wonder whether or not the optics have stood out for you of potentially, some would say, posh, spoilt brats interrupting working-class people's enjoyment. Your views on that, Alex?
But you're really trying to make out like there's some sort of class warfare between the middle class and the working class, and that's absolutely not true. But we do have a class warfare between the upper classes and everybody else. Our government are being paid £3.5 million by climate deniers, by fossil fuel lobbyists, in order to push these policies through. That's been reported widely by The Guardian and other sources. And still, you're asking us about students.
But that ties in, really, Alex. That really ties in with what I'm trying to say. Because should you not maybe be doing more to target those people directly, as opposed to if it's stopping people from getting to work, or indeed the Crucible? Again, it's more traditionally the working class people who appear to be suffering, as opposed to maybe you going directly to those top elites. So, are you more scared of those people? Do you think?
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because from April 21st, Extinction Rebellion are going to be occupying Westminster, the places outside Parliament. So if anybody is angry about what the government is doing, they should come join us. And they should come join Just Stop Oil from April 24th as we march the streets of London. You see, we have been to oil and gas companies. We have been outside Parliament. Every single day in October, we are waiting outside Parliament.
Have you been to Beijing?
And yet, that doesn't get anywhere near as much media attention.
No, but fair enough. I reckon you'd get a a boatload of media attention if you rocked up in Beijing. Have you thought about doing that?
Well, sadly, that's far away. I don't live there. We can only put our own house in order first. Like, we're supposed to be climate leaders, and yet we're pushing through a new coal mine.
I do understand that, but
such a high rate of unemployment right now. Why aren't we trying to push for green jobs? Solar panel farms can be built in 6 weeks.
OK. Are both of those things not true at the same time, which is that we are both climate leaders and we are also putting forward a new coal mine, so that we are reducing CO2 levels at a faster rate than pretty much anyone in the G20? We are doing these things and we are introducing net zero rules and regs for people. But at the same time, we are also doing things like the coal mine. So two things can be true at the same time, Alex, can't they?
Not in this case. Patrick, I hate the argument of, oh, let's put all the blame on China. Like, just because
not all of it,
China,
I mean, it'd be stupid.
For more oil and gas doesn't mean that we should. And China say that marital rape is okay. Does that mean we should have marital rape here in the UK? If China jumped off a bridge, would we jump off a bridge too?
Yeah, no, I understand that clearly your first and foremost responsibility would want to be the country that you're living in. And I get all of that. But at the same time, a lot of people would say, well, even if we did as a country exactly what you want us to do, exactly what you wanted us to do, it wouldn't really make any difference unless China, India and some other developing nations as well did exactly the same thing. And you're not really trying to do anything to stop them, are you?
Patrick, let me tell you what difference it would make. It means we would have subsidised public transport here in the UK, so people could transport for cheaper. It means we'd have renewable energies, so the air we breathe would be cleaner. It means that our energy bills would be lower. People's houses would be warmer because they have insulation. You know, you make us out as if we're some cult or something, but ultimately, all of our requests are really reasonable. People want cleaner air. People want lower energy bills.
I do think, with absolute respect, I do think that one of the reasons why some people might be of the view that there is an element of the cult about it is that, unfortunately, sometimes... Well, no, you shake your head, but there have been some pretty fruity views put out about, like, well, if we don't act now, then there's going to be this total breakdown in law and order and we're all going to die. And there's even been things about people are going to come round to your house and rape your mothers and all this. And that is kind of cult leader stuff, right? It is kind of cult leader stuff. Can I just ask you, Alex, if that's all right? Just ask you... Can I ask you about one thing that Eddie said to me? Eddie said to me that he was so fearful of the future that he doesn't really see much point about getting a job or having kids. Can I ask, where are you on that?
Look, I just want to bring the attention to, if a young person is really so fearful about the future that they don't want to have kids, why is the question, about that as opposed to, oh my God, the future is terrible for young people right now. Why don't we try and improve it?
But we've spoken about that.
The International Panel for Climate Change which is signed off by 11,000 scientists, 195 countries, including the UK, so you know the data is accurate, is saying we have a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future for all.
And you've said that. You've said that, absolutely. I am just keen, very, very lastly, Alex, if that's all right. You know, do you think that we should be bringing more children into this world as it is, or is that morally unconscionable?
I really hope that we can solve the climate crisis so I don't have to make that decision. Right now, I don't know. The future genuinely looks that bad. I don't know about you, but I can't eat fire. Our crops are going on fire.
OK.
What are we going to do about it? We have to switch to renewable energies. We have to make more change. People have to come and join us and march the streets. From April 21st with Extinction Rebellion, from April 24th with Just Stop Oil, please come and join us.
Look, Alex, thank you very, very much. And I really do enjoy... It's one thing I will always say about Just Stop Oil. They always put someone forward to talk to us, which, frankly, is more than can be said for a few groups out there. So thank you very much. Alex de Koning there, who is of Just Stop Oil. Right, now, off the back of that, I was talking earlier about this chap called Eddie, who was at the Crucible. I think he's quite famous now, isn't he? Eddie Whittingham painted a picture of a very bleak future when he talked about not having children on moral grounds. And it got me thinking... Is climate alarmism giving younger people anxiety about their future? Is it potentially causing mental health issues? Joining me now is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Lucy, thank you very much. Look, do you think when you see some of these young people so fearful about the future that they don't want to have kids or get a job, that this climate alarmism is maybe causing mental health problems?
No, I don't. I don't think it's the climate situation that's giving them alarm. I think there are plenty of other things, like the cost of living crisis, the fact that they don't know where they're going to be able to buy a house or what their next job might be, and all of the disruption to their education. That has really severely affected their mental health. But what you're seeing with climate change activism, particularly in younger people, is a classic situation within adolescence. The brain undergoes huge growth and huge fluctuation, as it should. And one of the effects of that is that the parts of the brain that get very excited about things, very passionate and wanting to see change and wanting to see it very quickly, kicks in. And those parts of the brain that we call the executive function, the sort of CEO part of the brain, quietens down a little bit. So the bits that would perhaps say to someone that behavior is rather risky or that thought process hasn't really been thought through, that side of the brain doesn't really function in quite the same way. And that's fantastic because we need younger people, adolescents, people in their early 20s to really shake things up and do things differently. And they've in a way, they've got the perfect brain to do it. But this isn't about anxiety. This is more about great passion, great enthusiasm, and almost, one might say, being quite reckless. They're not thinking about the longer term consequences of their own personal action.
OK, I just wonder if it's quite nihilistic. I just wonder if there is this sense of everything is so bleak unless we act right now in a very extreme way that nothing else matters. Is that not a concern, really, mentally speaking?
No, so that again is very black and white thinking. And it goes back to quite a primitive part of our brain where we really need to marshal our resources to make some big decisions around survival or not. So we saw that, when you're under threat, the brain doesn't really think through sophisticated niceties about how to get yourself under a situation, let's say, historically, if you were attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, you're not thinking through, I wonder what the logics of this is. Your brain is just going into something much more primitive, fight or flight. This is a similar thing. So the brain is doing exactly what it needs to do at this particular stage of people's brain developmental growth. But what the rest of us do is we look at that and we think there isn't very much nuance here. There isn't very much thought for the other things that need to come into play. You were talking to your previous guest about he was very sad that there was a new coal was being brought forward, and you're saying, well, that's because we have an energy crisis and we need to heat people's homes. So it's too black and white, but it is a mistake to think that this is a mental health issue.
Look, thank you very much. That's absolutely fascinating stuff, Lucy. Wonderful insight there. Broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. And I think that was really fascinating, actually, I must say. Anyway, right, moving on now. Welsh Labour wants to hand out, get this, £1,600 a month to young migrants and asylum seekers. That's the plan, anyway. That's the plan. The monthly payout essentially means that asylum seekers would receive a basic universal income on top of legal aid. The proposal was exposed after The Sun saw a letter to Whitehall which showed 3 Welsh Labour ministers backing the plans. The UK government currently spends around £6 million a day on migrant accommodation. And joining me now is Stephen Wolfe, Director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen, look, thank you very, very much. Now, this payment of £1,600 a month, by my metric, is double the state pension. Is that right?
It's not only double the state pension, it's nearly quadruple the amount that a single person under the age of 25 would get for universal credit. Someone under 25 living in Wales would only get £292.11 a month to live on. So what you're basically saying to someone is, come to this country. If you're born in Wales, why don't you go and leave the country and come back as an asylum seeker, because you're going to get £1,400 more a month from the Welsh Labour government.
And on top of legal aid as well, I mean, it does seem quite astonishing. No doubt it'll get a big reaction in the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But is this not the kind of thing that the people of Wales should stand up for and say, well, do we actually want our taxpayers' money being spent on making asylum seekers who presumably are staying rent-free in hotels or wherever they are, to actually have all of this money, which is much more than me or you might be getting if we were just an ordinary Welsh citizen?
Well, I know people around here in living in Winchester who are only receiving £1,400 a month, including their accommodation, for universal credit. And Welsh Government is basically laughing in their faces by giving them £1,600 to asylum seekers, which is a salary of around £19,200 on top of their free accommodation and on top of their legal bills. And there's legal aid that they will get that people in the rest of the country will not receive. For example, if you have a divorce and want to fight over your child. So what you're getting is a very discriminatory payment being paid to people who are coming to this country, and what is much bigger, much larger, and therefore much more unfair for those who live in this country who might be poor and in desperate need for larger incomes that they're not going to get from the Welsh Government.
Stephen, thank you very much. Stephen Wolfe there, Director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Later in the show, I'm having a debate on this. Should the Welsh Government, and there's only plans at this stage, actually be giving £1,600 a month to asylum seekers plus taxpayer-funded legal aid? Do you think that's right? Do you think that's fair? Get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Big debate coming on that later in the show. But another day, another drama for the SNP. Now the party's treasurer has been arrested. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hours to deal with disruptive protests.
Welcome back. Let's get to the latest drama surrounding the SNP, shall we? And the party's treasurer, Colin Beattie, has been arrested in connection with an investigation into their finances. It comes 2 weeks after former SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrell was released without charge pending further investigation. Murrell is, of course, Nicola Sturgeon's husband. We'll go now to GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire, who's at Holyrood, where Humza Yousaf has actually been laying out his priorities for the next 3 years. Good afternoon, Tony. Well, I imagine whatever the Scottish First Minister had to say was rather overshadowed by today's developments.
Yeah, certainly, as Alex Cole-Hamilton, the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, pointed out, pretty much torpedoed it. Certainly after 9 o'clock this morning, Colin Beattie was arrested in connection to this ongoing police investigation into the £600,000 that was supposed to be ring-fenced for a second independence referendum. Nevertheless, talking to reporters just before he went into the chamber, Humza Yousaf said, while acknowledging that the timing could have been better, that he was still going to press ahead and set out a timetable for what his first 3 years in office might look like. And that he did. He certainly looked to basically formulate 3 missions, if you like, around welfare, around health, and then around kind of the green economy, which he ran his platform on as leader. So certainly when he kicked off the proceedings, he wanted to look into poverty and inequality, and on that he was talking a lot about this cost of living crisis, which he later responded to in questions, which we're about to hear right now.
What I would say to Megan Gallagher is awfully brave to talk about a global cost of living crisis. We're dealing with a Tory Westminster cost of living crisis. It is brave. Some may use another word for it when it comes to talking about propriety. Your Prime Minister, your Deputy Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister are all under investigation by the Standards Commission. So yes, while we face challenges, while we absolutely face challenges, I'd rather be standing here with the opportunity to deliver for the people of Scotland rather than languishing in the opposition like Megan Gallagher and the Scottish Tories.
All that noise there, that wasn't any football match, that was in the building right behind me here at the Scottish Parliament. Humza Yousaf setting out his idea that the cost of being independent has never been clearer. Now, of course, he went on to talk about a delay to the really much drinking alcohol ban. He wants to kind of revisit that because he understands a lot of the condemnation that came out as a result of that. Also in the deposit return scheme, certainly probably a bit of a loss for the Scottish Greens, of which they share power, but certainly he came out swinging, at least until the questions, when we were told by Megan Gallagher there that Deputy Leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, that the SNP is in total meltdown, followed up by Anna Sarwar, Leader of Scottish Labour, who said the SNP can't get past being mired in scandal, being mired in division, and even used Kate Forbes' favourite tagline, continuity won't cut it. Not the best start to Humza Yousaf's relaunch, I think you'll agree.
Absolutely. Look, Tony, thank you very much. Tony Maguire there, who is up in Scotland for us, analysing a busy day. Humza Yousaf making his initial address, trying to outline his deep vision for Scotland going forward. But meanwhile, SNP leaders have apparently held emergency talks following the arrest of its treasurer, Colin Beattie, earlier today. So the SNP very, very much in turmoil. And he was, of course, the party treasurer. So there we go. Right, OK, moving on. There is lots more to come between now and 4 o'clock. A judge says that naming teenage murderer Leighton Amies is in the public interest. He was 14 at the time that he stabbed another teenager to death. He thinks that it would act as a deterrent to other would-be killers. Now, is he right, or is it actually against a very young individual's human rights? Get your views coming in on that. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And there's more details about the King's coronation, including a special coronation quiche. Quiche Lorraine, yeah, see what we did there? Yeah, OK. Anyway, I've been putting together some of my own ideas for what I think should be on the coronation menu. I want yours. So far, fish and chips is the winner, actually. So, you know, why not? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Get the views coming in. Right now, though, it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you and good afternoon. It's 3:32. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The SNP treasurer has been arrested by police investigating the party's finances. Colin Beattie is the second person to be questioned by detectives who are trying to establish how more than £600,000 in donations set aside for an independence referendum had been used. Earlier this month, the Scottish National Party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, was questioned for more than 11 hours. Mr Murrell, who's the husband of former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, was released without charge, pending further investigation. Labour is demanding transparency, calling on the Prime Minister to publish his financial interests today. Parliament's ethics watchdog is investigating whether Rishi Sunak failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major announcement in last month's budget. She holds shares in Koru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to recruit more childminders. Number 10 says Mr Sunak will clarify why it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. Charities and campaigners are warning a new ban on forcibly installing prepayment meters don't go far enough. Suppliers across England, Scotland and Wales have agreed to a new voluntary code of practice to protect vulnerable people. But the End Fuel Poverty Coalition said the plans failed to deal with the energy debt relief for those most in need and that the new rules must be firmly enforced. 2 police forces have been reprimanded for unlawfully recording over 200,000 phone calls. The Information Commissioner's Office says Surrey and Sussex Police says it followed the rollout of an app in 2016 that also captured personal data. The recordings, likely with victims, witnesses and perpetrators, occurred without their knowledge. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2437 and €1.1338. The price of gold is £1,610 and 29 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,901 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
OK, so you might have missed this one, but a report released by the US Senate has claimed that Chinese researchers began developing 2 COVID vaccines back in November 2019, way before the pandemic started. And, according to The Telegraph, the claims were made in a 300-page document that also concluded that the pandemic was most likely linked to a lab leak in Wuhan as a result of a research-related incident, which is something that plenty of people have been saying for rather a long time, isn't it? And we're getting rather a lot of stick for saying. Joining me now is oncologist Professor Angus Dalgleish. Professor, thank you very much. Look, what does this report tell us that we didn't already know? Is it confirming what many people already thought?
Basically, what this report is doing is making it very clear that all of us who basically said that the origin of this virus clearly came from the laboratory in the Wuhan, because 1, they'd been researching on it, 2, they had published, they'd been making changes to it to be more infectious, and 3, that it was amazing how, when it did enter the human population, it was so perfectly adapted, and the only explanation for that could have been a lab leak at the most generous. And basically that has now confirmed it. It has gone one step further, however, because it is actually looked that there was issues on making a vaccine for this product, for this mutation, before the virus ever escaped from the laboratory. And I think that's basically what it did. It escaped. The security was so lax in those laboratories, and they'd been admonished for it, but nothing much happened. So I think it did get in. They were working on it to make it more infectious, but they were making vaccines for it as well. And this is not new. There was evidence that patents for a vaccine against this virus had been filed some time before, so it gets really murky. What this report has done is basically what people like me got admonished for, cancelled, suppressed, everything you can imagine, is that we were completely right. But actually that it might be even worse than even we suspected, that they were deliberately making a vaccine to this virus mutant before it escaped. So why on earth would they be doing that? That's what we now need to know.
Go on, well, what's your theory on that?
Well, the theory on that is that the EcoHealth Alliance, which is DASAX, role in Fauci's funding of all this work in Wuhan, because he couldn't do it in America, is that they were meant to be identifying likely viruses that might cause the next pandemic, and then be in a very good position to make vaccines for them. So as soon as the pandemic occurred, they could basically dial up a vaccine and usher it in, rather like it's being done. But I thought the whole point of this work was to make sure that there wasn't going to be a new pandemic, not to increase the chances of a pandemic, which is exactly what's happened. So to me, it gets very, very circumlocutory with why would you make a vaccine against something that was a risk if you say it was never going to escape, unless you had plans for it to escape? I mean, it gets even murkier than we previously thought.
OK, I mean, that is obviously a very, very interesting thing. I'll just one more relatively quickly with you, Angus, if that's all right. And, you know, you touched there a bit on plans for it to escape. A lot of people will be, Angus, shouting at their TV screens now, and just forgive me for playing devil's advocate to this, saying that's the kind of thing that cranks say. Your views?
Yes, it is the kind of thing that cranks would say. And I must say, right at the beginning, when we started looking into it and realising escape, we were very generous that they were basically working on this system to see what makes it more infectious and what doesn't, etc. And the escape was perfectly innocent, just the usual human incompetence of anything like that. But it was rather worrying that there seemed to be a programme of making these viruses more infectious. And I mean, even I was surprised when this virus did escape, the head of the Wuhan Institute of the virology was replaced with somebody whose previous title was head of the bioweapons program of the People's Republic of China. Well, that's not very subtle in anybody's thing, and even I was surprised at that.
All right, look, fascinating stuff, Angus, as ever. I look forward to talking to you again soon. That is oncologist Professor Angus Dalgleish, and he's reacting to the latest report anyway out of the US Senate that the likely theory is now that the virus leaked from a Wuhan lab. What do you make of that? But moving on, the Home Office has proposed to ban knives such as machetes and zombie knives that have no practical use. And the news comes a day after a judge allowed the media to name the 15-year-old boy, who's 14 at the time though, who stabbed and killed a teenager in a park. Leighton Amy's murdered Tomasz Oleszak in Gateshead last October. A judge ruled that naming Amy's was in the public interest and should act as a deterrent to young people carrying knives. But I wanted to know whether or not kids who kill should be named. I'm joined now by Patrick Green, who is the CEO of the Ben Kinsella Trust. The organisation was set up after the fatal stabbing of 16-year-old student Ben Kinsella in Islington in 2008. Thank you very much for joining me. Great to have you on the show. I'll get right to the chase here. Do you think that kids who kill should be publicly named?
Well, there's no precedent for what the judge has done. This is unusual. A young person of this age is usually given anonymity, and usually that applies until they're 18. I commend the judge for his determination to try and find a deterrent to stop knife crime. That's something we do, I've been looking to, and continue to do as an organisation. But whether this action will lead to those results, I'm not sure that there's evidence to show that. Clearly, over 18s are routinely named when they can commit these offences, and we clearly don't see a significant difference in knife crime rates as a result. So. To quote a legal phrase, the jury's out on this, and I think we've just got to wait and see if it has the desired effect.
Do you think that for victims' families, who I imagine you spend a lot of time talking to and dealing with, what would be the impact for them if they're very often their child's killer, who is a child, him or herself, isn't named? So they can commit this horrendous crime, they can take a life, and then they can get whatever sentence they get from the judge, and no one really would ever know that they committed that crime. Is it good for the victim's family to have their son or daughter's killer named, no matter how young they are?
Yeah, for many families who lose children to knife crime, they will feel a sense of justice, certainly, for the fact that the killer is named. That doesn't apply to all families. This is something that everybody responds to differently. But I'm sure that there will be families out there who would feel a sense of justice for when the perpetrator is named.
And look, what would you say to people who say that the human rights of this 15-year-old, now 15, he was 14 when he stabbed another child to death, that his human rights have been violated as a result of his name and mugshot and identity and all of that being put out there?
Certainly, I mean, the laws which was brought in 1933, which covers this, was set up around the protection of young people who do, commit crimes at a fairly early age. This is a difficult matter to work your way through. I don't think there's a straightforward yes or no answer to this. Certainly, we don't have at our disposal the background information that the judge had when we came to this decision. So I'm not going to rush to make a decision not knowing all the facts that are before us.
No, fair enough. And I think, well, it's mainly really why we wanted to talk about it is because I think it is such a divisive issue, actually, when it comes to whether or not kids themselves should be named publicly, even if they commit the most horrific crimes. But Patrick, I'll just say thank you for coming on and thank you for all the good work that you do as well. And I hope to talk to you soon, hopefully under slightly better circumstances. Patrick Green there is the CEO of the Ben Kinsella Trust, the organisation that was set up after the fatal stabbing of 16-year-old Ben Kinsella in 2008. Now, more has been revealed. Get this, it's very much a shift in tone, I must say, people. More has been revealed about the plans for the Coronation celebrations, including how the guests will be treated to one of the King's favourite dishes. Now, it's quiche Lorraine, which can be spelt another way, of course, to give it a royal symbol. Well, I will be revealing what else I think should be on the menu, so prepare for my personal coronation menu. I want to know from you, though, what you think you would like to see on the menu. What would be your ideal coronation menu? If you can put a royal twist on it, that would be ideal. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop
failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
How would you feel about your heating being powered by cow poo? Well, that's what might happen if the dairy farmers have their way. They're calling on the government to use a cow's four stomachs and incredible methane production ability for good and to support the UK's energy independence. Here to tell us more about this, OK, about the campaign to harness the power of cow poo, is James Pirrie, who is the Vice President of Logistics at the UK's biggest dairy cooperative, Arla. And you've been doing something, well, it certainly grabbed my attention today. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so today Arla Foods, which is Britain's largest dairy cooperative, has been calling for the government to support farmers in using renewable energy resources such as biogas, which will support both in terms of the UK's energy security and independence.
OK, all right, and you decided to go and take your protest to Westminster, didn't you? Or demonstration, it's not a protest really, is it? Yeah.
Correct. So today was about driving awareness. So what we did today was we erected a dairy-inspired Victorian sewer lamp to showcase the untapped potential of biogas as a renewable energy resource.
OK, all right. And how did that take the form? Wasn't it a giant cow or something? Is that right?
It was. It was a giant cow with a Victorian sewer lamp attached to its rear.
Right.
So what today was about was showcasing biogas as an untapped opportunity.
Oh, now, we do have, for those watching on telly, that is the cow, right?
That is.
And I was desperate to get the cow into the studio, but I was told it wouldn't fit in the lift. So there we go. But the symbolism of this is what? How much of an impact could this have on, well, our energy going forward and people's lives, really?
Significant.
Right.
So within the livestock industry, of which Arla farmers are part of, we generate around 91 million tonnes of cow manure or cow slurry, as well as 10 million tonnes of food waste. If we could convert that into energy, it has the potential to heat over 6.4 million houses in the UK.
So the answer is literally either staring us in the face or sometimes, unfortunately, on the bottom of our shoe.
Absolutely. Some of the great ideas aren't necessarily the new ideas. And what's interesting about today is we've taken a Victorian-inspired sewer lamp to showcase the untapped opportunity of biofuel. OK,
look, fantastic stuff. I do really appreciate you coming on and doing this. And like I said, it certainly piqued my attention, this, because I was aware of this cow in the middle of Westminster, and I thought it was a great idea to raise awareness. And why not? And just lastly with you, I mean, look, could this be cheaper than us doing some of the other novel, slightly annoying ideas that we're being told about at the moment?
Well, what this showcases is we have a resource, a waste, that can be converted into energy. For context, we create about 170 million tonnes of organic waste in the UK each year.
Yeah.
If we use about a quarter of that so far at this moment in time, if we could get the government support to leverage all of that organic waste, we have the potential to create 27 million tonnes of CO2 reduction, which is equivalent of planting 415 million trees.
Fantastic stuff. All right, well, thank you very much. Great stuff, that. I thoroughly enjoyed it. James Pirrie there, who's the Vice President of Logistics at the UK's biggest dairy cooperative, Arla, and I am still fizzing about the idea that I couldn't get a cow in the studio, by the way, but there we go. Now, with less than a month to go until King Charles III's coronation, we are getting a clearer picture of who's on the guest list and what culinary delights that will be served up. I have been seeing your suggestions about what should be on the menu. I'll go to those in a second. May the 6th, and here... it'll be on May the 6th, yes. And here are the details of the planning. Is our reporter, Cameron Walker. Cameron, thank you very much. Yeah, so what is the planning?
Well, King's coronation quiche is what is in the planning. Of course, we had coronation chicken in 1953. Yeah. Then we had a very complicated Platinum Jubilee pudding for the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee that just went last June, which involves quite a lot of quite difficult ingredients to get hold of and was also quite complicated to make. So the idea with this one is that it's simple to make, people can share it, it's got spinach, it's got broad beans, it's got fresh tarragon. I think perhaps what might have swung it for the King and Queen Consort, from my understanding, it's one of their personal favourites, developed by quiche. This particular
I would have thought they'd have
quiche.
much more expensive taste than something you can nip over and buy in Lidl.
Well, it's interesting. From my understanding, King Charles one of his favourite dishes is anything to do with eggs and cheese, which, of course, quiche does have. So that is why they wanted to perhaps have this as a dish that lots of people could share together in the country. Of course, cost of living crisis, not that expensive. Ingredients. Now, who sampled it today, though, at Westminster Abbey? The Duke of Edinburgh, the King's brother, Prince Edward, was there being hosted a big coronation big lunch, which, of course, is designed to bring different communities together. So it was kind of a pre-coronation lunch at Westminster Abbey, hosted by the Dean of Westminster, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who, of course, is the guy who's going to put the crown on King Charles's head on the 6th of May, and Bake-Off Judge Prue Leith as well. So, yeah, it's a very interesting time. I can't wait to try it.
Well, look, obviously that was what's going to be actually served up to people. And the suggestions for people to make at the various different parties that take place. It's good hot, it's good cold, you can bring it to a street party, you can do whatever. And it's not too expensive to make, so that's the logic behind it, I think, isn't it, really? But guests at the Coronation big lunch at Westminster Abbey did have that favourite quiche Lorraine served up to them. King Charles III, it said, adores, as you said there, Cameron, anything to do with eggs and cheese. And the royal family's website does describe it as a deep quiche with a crisp, light pastry and delicate flavours of spinach, broad beans and fresh tarragon. What we should have done there is play the M&S advert music over that description, shouldn't we? That sounds delicious. It does sound delicious. My mouth is watering as we speak. But what else will be dished up on the big day? I've put some thought into this, OK? And I've come up with what I think will be a banquet suitable for a king. I'll get your reaction to this afterwards, Cameron, OK? So guests will be treated initially to a nice little cold glass of Kir Royale.
Ooh, I like that.
So we do that. We're off to a winner. Nothing like a cocktail to get the taste buds going, is there? Next up, they get stuck into a starter of Coronation chicken salad. So healthy, classic, nod to the Queen, nod to the Queen.
Indeed.
Now, for the main course, is the pièce de résistance, is a fillet of beef Prince Albert, so slight royal theme there, a dish named in honour of the husband of Queen Victoria. You cannot go wrong with a massive hunk of beef. OK, that's my view there. So what better way, though, to round things off? A Victoria sponge cake. I'm sorry, I just want to keep it simple. I would have, if it was up to me, I'd have a much thicker layer of the icing in the actual Victoria sponge as opposed to the jam there. A culinary delight, though, conjured up during the Victorian era. That, for me, would be good. I was asking people, though, what they think they should have. And Bob just says fish and chips. Fish and chips has proved to be quite popular. Sarah went in with doner meat and chips, which, Sarah, to be honest with you, whilst I admire your ambition, there is absolutely no chance that King Charles is going to tuck into doner meat and chips on the big day. There is a fantastic couple of suggestions here. Lobster Deluxe, that's from many. And here's a good one. Brian's been on. King prawns. King prawns. Simple, and it makes perfect sense. Cameron, what will you be tucking into on the big day?
Well, I'll be Buckingham Palace, so I'm not sure. It'll probably be a quick sandwich. Hopefully some coronation chicken. I'm sure there'll be a bit of quiche. I like your Victoria sponge idea as well. I do like that.
I couldn't help but notice as well that you got particularly excited about the champagne-infused tipple at the start.
I did, yeah. So I won't be doing that on the day. Maybe after the day
Maybe
itself.
after. Yeah. I think you'll deserve it after the day. Cameron Walker there, our royal reporter. So those are my suggestions for the big royal menu. I want to know what yours are, OK? So get them coming in. You've seen what we're trying to do here now, so get involved. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But in the next hour, 2 Just Stop Oil activists were arrested after disrupting the World Snooker Championships last night. I want to know whether or not these are posh, entitled, spoilt people trying to disrupt ordinary working-class people's lives. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. It's about to go 4 o'clock. Here's what I've got for you this hour. Just Stop Oil, at it again, were they at the Crucible yesterday, at the snooker. But I want to know whether or not this is a bunch of posh, self-entitled people who are just trying to hammer the working class. I want to know all about that. And in other news as well, we're going to Wales now, because get this, in Wales, the Welsh Government, under Labour there, is planning on giving asylum seekers £1,600 a month and money for legal aid. That is roughly, by the way, double the state pension. What do you make of that? Moving on. 2 days for an ambulance. Can you imagine waiting 2 days for an ambulance? But that is the shocking reality for some people. I want to find out why there is such a big crisis amongst our ambulance service. And finally, a little bit of light relief for you. I just gave you at the end of that last hour my own menu for the Coronation. Quiche Lorraine is going to be on the actual menu. That's what King Charles wants you all to have. But I came up with a few novel ideas as well. I want to hear from you. What do you think your big royal banquet should be on Coronation Day? Patrick Christys on GB News. Get the emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. What do you make of the Just Stop Oil protest? I suspect one of the big ones this hour is going to be that news that the Welsh Labour government is planning on giving Channel migrants and asylum seekers £1,600 a week. A month even, sorry, there we go. A month, very important to clarify that. Get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Headlines now with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you very much. It's 1 minute past 4. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The SNP treasurer has been arrested by police investigating the party's finances. Colin Beattie is the second person to be questioned by detectives who are trying to establish how more than £600,000 in donations set aside for an independence referendum had been used. Earlier this month, the Scottish National Party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, was questioned for more than 11 hours. Mr Murrell, who's the husband of former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, was released without charge pending further investigation. When questioned in Holyrood, SNP leader Humza Yousaf hit back at the Conservative Party.
It is brave, some may use another word for it, when it comes to talking about propriety. Your Prime Minister, your Deputy Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister are all under investigation by the Standards Commission. So yes, while we face challenges, while we absolutely face challenges, I'd rather be standing here with the opportunity to deliver for the people of Scotland rather than languishing in the opposition like Megan Gallagher and the Scottish Tories.
Well, the Scottish First Minister also set out his vision for the country in his first major policy statement since taking office. Mr Yousaf said the party will focus on equality, opportunity and community. He also announced a delay in the deposit return scheme for drinks, cans and bottles, as well as a 6-month trial to remove peak time fares from ScotRail trains. Labour is demanding transparency, calling on the Prime Minister to publish his financial interests today. Parliament's ethics watchdogs investigating whether Rishi Sunak failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major announcement in last month's budget. She holds shares in Coru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to recruit more childminders. Number 10 says Mr Sunak will clarify why it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, wants the Prime Minister to come clean.
I think transparency really does matter, and the Prime Minister did promise transparency and integrity, and so he does have to clear this up and declare what his interest is. The Ministerial Register has not been published for nearly a year, so I think for the Prime Minister today, he should publish his part of the register, clear this up and be open about this issue.
An American journalist has lost an appeal against his detention in Russia. Ivan Gerskovich will be held in a Moscow prison until at least the 29th of May on charges of espionage. Mr Gerskovich, who works for the Wall Street Journal, is accused of trying to obtain military secrets on behalf of Washington and faces a possible 20-year sentence if convicted. The newspaper says the charges are a vicious affront to a free press. Well, speaking outside the court, the US ambassador to Russia, Lynn Tracy, called for his immediate release.
I can report that he is in good health and remains strong despite his circumstances. We will continue to provide all appropriate support to Evan and his family, and we expect Russian authorities to provide continued consular access to Evan. The charges against Evan are baseless, and we call on the Russian Federation to immediately release him.
More machetes and zombie knives could be banned in England and Wales, with criminals who buy or sell them facing up to 2 years in jail. Under plans, police could also be given new powers to seize and destroy weapons. Home Office Minister Chris Philp told GB News the move would make communities safer.
It will be a criminal offence to manufacture, supply, import or possess these dangerous knives in private. There's no reason to have these knives, no legitimate use. They are only used by criminals to intimidate and threaten the public, or indeed to engage in inter-gang warfare. That's why we're taking decisive action today to make these dangerous knives illegal.
Charities and campaigners are warning new rules for energy suppliers don't go far enough. Firms across England, Scotland and Wales have agreed to a new voluntary code of practice to help protect vulnerable people. Under the new rules, suppliers must make at least 10 attempts to contact a customer and carry out a welfare visit before a prepayment meter can be installed. The End Fuel Poverty Coalition says the plans fail to deal with energy debt relief for those most in need. And free-range eggs are returning to shelves with restrictions to prevent the spread of bird flu now lifted. From today, hens which have been kept indoors since November are now allowed to roam freely again. The government says the bird flu risk levels have been reduced to medium. Experts say despite the relaxation of restrictions, the disease still exists in the wild bird population. Right, this is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Now, I start this hour with Just Stop Oil's latest stunt. The activist who caused havoc at last night's Snooker World Championship is a full-time student who just 2 weeks ago told GB News that he opposes having children on moral ground. Eddie Whittingham invaded the playing area at Sheffield's Crucible Theatre and covered one of the snooker tables in orange paint powder. People watching on telly will be able to have a look at it now. There he goes. Yep, good stuff, Eddie. Whittingham was wearing a T-shirt with the slogan Just Stop Oil as he interrupted the match between Robert Milkins and Joe Perry. Well, look, I actually last spoke to this activist who disrupted the World Snooker Championship game on March the 31st. And, well, look, I have this to say. I am just keen to know, what do you want to do after university? What's your big ambition? What kind of line of work are you going to go into?
My dream is to be a writer, but any vocation, any dream is looking precarious if we don't sort out the climate crisis.
So are you genuinely so fearful that the world is going to end within your lifetime that you don't care particularly about future employment prospects or anything like that? You are just so convinced that you're going to see the end of the world?
Well, I already have decided that I won't be having children because I can't guarantee that there will be a habitable planet for them to grow up into. OK, is that a difficult decision for you? I mean, that's quite a bold decision to make, isn't it? Well, I think it's the moral choice, given the circumstances that we're facing.
So morally, you think it would be wrong to bring more children into this world?
If we don't sort out the climate crisis.
Yeah, well, look, I want your views on all of this, because from where I'm sitting, so Eddie, I did a longer-form interview with him. I also interviewed him a couple of weeks before that as well. And so he's got a student loan. He's studying at university. He has no massive desire to get a job. If he does get a job, he wants to be a writer. And with the best will in the world to aspiring authors out there, I don't think there's any guarantee that the taxpayer's getting that student loan back anytime soon, is there? Then I look at some other activists, like Phoebe Plummer, who's the quite famous one with pink hair, who did a fabulous interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg on this channel not so long ago. And according to reports, really first-rate, top-drawer education, tens of thousands of pounds a year. And it just got me wondering whether or not, actually, what we're dealing with here is a lot of people who are quite well off, a bit posh maybe, don't really have financial issues of their own. And when you look at them attacking things like the snooker or football or whatever event that they go to, horse racing, I know that was animal rising, but horse racing, are they really kind of just poshos going after traditional working-class sports? Then you look at people who are actually disrupted massively when Extinction Rebellion and co. glue themselves to things in cities across the country or motorways. It's ordinary working people, isn't it, who are trying to get to work. And I just wonder whether or not there is something going on there, whether this is almost some kind of class war. But last night's incident at the World Snooker Championships was just the latest in a very long line of high-profile protests staged by Just Stop Oil. And I'm going to run you through a few of them now to just refresh ourselves. So in July last year, 6 people were arrested at the British Grand Prix after 5 activists invaded the track. All 6 were convicted of causing a public nuisance and received suspended sentences and community orders. The suspended sentences bit there, I think, really got a load of people quite hot under the collar, didn't it, for what they did, endangering life, not least their own. But also in October 2022, Just Stop Oil protesters slapped cake in the face of a waxwork of King Charles at Madame Tussauds. Ah, look at that. That'll show him. Ah, there you go. And in November 2022, Just Stop Oil staged 4 days of protest on the M25. A total of 58 people were charged and 1 activist was jailed for 6 months. And then, last night, as we've been talking about, Just Stop Oil targeted the World Snooker Championships in Sheffield. 2 people have since been arrested. And there we go. I did do quite a big topic earlier on, actually, on whether or not we think that some people who are dead convinced by climate alarmism that they're going to live to see the end of the world, that we're all going to burn to death or starve to death or something like that, is that having a massive impact on their mental health? And if they don't think that we should be bringing children into this world because the world is such a horrible and bleak place, if they don't think it's worth getting a job, if everything, frankly, is totally and utterly pointless unless they get exactly what they want, then actually what hope have they got on whether or not that is climate alarmism causing a mental health problem? Get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, in a moment, I'm going to talk about the plan to give some asylum seekers £1,600 a month, OK, which is around double the state pension, by the way. But now, to the news, that a group of Wirral MPs have condemned government plans to house almost 2,000 asylum seekers in a vessel on the Mersey. Joining me now is GB News' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, yes, OK, so politicians are opposing in the Wirral plans to have around, 2,000 asylum seekers just on a boat off the coast?
Yeah, I mean, I think the politicians may be condemning it, but I think in the country at large, there will be quite a lot of support for this government proposal. It's part of a government imperative, really, to get out of the daily use of hotels to house some 51,000 asylum seekers at a cost of £6 million a day. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says that's just simply not sustainable. And that's why they're looking at models of bigger, either purpose-built or adapted centres where they can house significant numbers of people in more modest accommodation that doesn't cost anywhere near as much as renting out some really quite exclusive hotels at times. It has, though, as we said, been met with a great deal of hostility from three MPs in the world, Angela Eagle, Margaret Greenwood, I should say, and Mick Whiteley, who have issued a statement condemning it. In that statement, Patrick, they say this government is abandoning its responsibilities to ensure the society and well-being of people, the safety and well-being of people claiming asylum in the UK. The government policy, it says, is now being driven by a sense of wanton cruelty without any intention of trying to help those people.
Now, we reached out to those MPs and we've not heard anything back from them. One thing that stood out to me, Mark, is, as I understand it, they're Labour MPs and they seem to be going off the idea that they oppose this in their area because of the cruelty, they say, towards the migrants. I suspect that many people watching and listening to this now might think, actually, it is deep down possibly because they don't want these people necessarily in their area. Unfortunately, I can't put that to any of these MPs because they've not decided to front up to it. They've just released a letter. But 2,000 does seem like rather a lot, Mark. I do agree with you, though, and I think in a wider public sense, this will be better than using hotels. But from what I can gather, the government isn't going to stop using hotels either.
There's no way it can stop using hotels for some considerable time because we have, as I say, 51,000 people currently in hotels. We've got 5,000 people that have crossed the English Channel so far this year. Now, the government, in a sense, has been very lucky that for weeks now, weather conditions in the Channel have been pretty poor. So there have been the odd occasion where the weather has improved enough for a few hundred at a time to come across. But once we get into the better weather and the flat calm conditions in the Channel, be in no doubt there will be very significant numbers of people still crossing the Channel. We've been across on the other side of the Channel in recent weeks and had a look at the fact that there are still many of these camps around Dunkirk, around Calais, even down towards Boulogne, that are there, that are full, that are filling up all of the time by other people who are coming in through southern Europe, through Italy, Spain, working their way up, many of them with the intention of getting to the northwest coast of France.
Yeah, look, Mark, thank you very, very much. Mark White, they're our home and security editor. Look, I do think it is interesting that, unfortunately, I am not able now to put the accusation to these MPs in the Wirral who are saying that the real reason that they don't want this boat of around 2,000 asylum seekers just in their area is because they are morally opposed to the way that these asylum seekers are being treated by this government. I am sceptical of that, personally. I personally think that maybe they think that their voters wouldn't want them there for a variety of different reasons and that they are pandering to that, which would seem slightly hypocritical, would it not? But, of course, again, unfortunately, I can't ask them that question because they have not decided to come on. But moving on, Welsh Labour wants to hand out £1,600 a month to young migrants. The monthly payout essentially means that asylum seekers will receive a universal basic income on top of their legal aid. The proposal was exposed after The Sun saw a letter to Whitehall which showed 3 Welsh Labour ministers backing the plans. The UK government currently spends around £6 million a day on migrant accommodation. With me now is Kevin Saunders. Kevin, thank you very much. And Kevin, of course, is a former Border Force official. Kevin, do you think that £1,600 a month to asylum seekers is fair and just in a society where at the moment people are struggling between heating and eating?
Good afternoon, Patrick. When I heard about this, I had to check the date to make sure it wasn't an April Fool. I've got to say that I have never heard anything in the whole time I worked in the Immigration Service and Border Force so ridiculous as this. It's absolutely stupid. What we're doing is we are rewarding people that have broken the law by coming across the channel with £1,600 a month and free legal aid. In itself, legal aid is means tested. So if you're giving them £1,600 a month, then they can't have free legal aid as the law currently stands. So this is
Kevin, that's a key point. That's a key point. And by the way, and I just want to drill down on that for our viewers and our listeners. So one of the reasons, as we understand it, and this is just a plan by the Welsh Labour government, but one of the key reasons why they want to give them £1,600 a month plus access to legal aid is that, again, as far as we're aware, if you were having £1,600 a month injected into your bank account, you would not actually ordinarily necessarily qualify for legal aid. No, so they're kind of getting double bubble, aren't they, Kevin?
Yeah, they are. And what really annoys me is I'm a state pensioner. It's more than I get in my state pension. And I've lived here for 69 years or been alive for 69 years and paid in. So I'm not exactly over the moon about this idea. And quite honestly, if I was living in Wales, I'd be even more unhappy.
Do you think now that this will be used as propaganda for people who are on the other side of the channel, thinking of coming over here? You know, we've got the potential for boats to be offshore somewhere. We've got flights to Rwanda that haven't taken off yet. And you can potentially spend your time rent-free in a 4-star hotel with £1,600 injected into your bank account and the British taxpayer paying for you to fight deportation. I mean, it is a joke, isn't it?
It is an absolute joke. And when the people smugglers get hold of this bit, this is what they're going to tell the people that want to come across. Go to Britain and they'll now pay you £1,600 a month and they'll give you free legal aid as well as everything else you're going to get. You know, it's absolute madness.
Kevin, look, thank you very much. Kevin Saunders. In fact, actually, just one more, Kevin. Sorry, I've just got time for you for one more, actually. You did mention there, aside from without your professional hound, just with your personal hound, this figure now is going to be double the state pension, OK? I think you did say before you are a pensioner now. I mean, have we got our priorities wrong? Because you have paid into the system your whole life.
Yes, we have. We've got it totally wrong. OK, we're going to get a rise of 10% this year in our state pension. I think it's this week we actually get it. But it's not actually. 10% sounds fantastic, but 10% on. I mean, I'll be quite honest. I get £155 a week in state pension because I was a civil servant. So I'm going to get an extra £15 a week. You know.
But there is an irony, Kevin, isn't there? Sorry, Kevin. There is an irony here that a man who used to be in charge, that we as a nation entrusted with securing our borders, is now receiving less money every single month than people who've entered this country illegally.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, it's ridiculous. Patrick, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
You just couldn't make it up.
And I don't see, quite honestly, I can't see how the people of Wales are going to vote for this. I really can't. I really can't.
All right. Look, Kevin, thank you very much. Kevin Saunders there, who is, of course, former UK immigration officer at the UK Border Force So a chap who we put in charge of our borders is now receiving less money in his pension than asylum seekers will receive if they're in Wales every single month. Does anyone else think that's a little bit skew-iff? Anyway, the soap opera that is the SNP threw up another bit of drama today as the party's treasurer was arrested. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today. Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
To deal with disruption.
Welcome back. I've got some breaking news for you, and it's on our top story. The 2 Just Stop Oil activists who were arrested after disrupting the World Snooker Championship have been bailed. Eddie Whittingham and a 52-year-old woman were arrested on suspicion of causing criminal damage. South Yorkshire police say they've been bailed until June the 15th. So there we go. That was, of course, the imagery from yesterday. Joining me now on this is internationally renowned sports broadcaster, total legend as well, Gary Newbon. Gary, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Look, I was keen, in light of the fact that what happened yesterday and that these 2 now have been bailed. And I was interviewing Eddie just a couple of weeks ago, and I've interviewed him a few times. I can't help but wonder whether or not attacking a traditionally working-class sport like snooker is really the best way to go about this. What do you make of it?
Well, I don't think it has to be any class of sport. I just think that peaceful demonstrations are quite permitted and encouraged by some people in this country, but not when it interferes, when it goes beyond that. And it doesn't matter what class of sport it is, it's got to be stopped. And you had a politician on your air just now. The answer is jail them. You know, soon Scott The other thing, of course, is that you could have a news blackout, but as a journalist, those pictures are fantastic. No journalist is going to back it out. But they're seeking publicity for their cause. And I saw somewhere that they say they're going to be more inventive if people don't do what they want them to do. So it's down to the politicians. Put them in jail. They'll soon stop it then. And it's no good saying that they're a martyr. Once they've been in jail and tasted what our jails are like, according to my friends, I've been in jail myself, they'll soon find out.
Well, look, you say that, and look, it's important as well for me to just reiterate that, you know, it is now up for the legal protocol and procedures that we have in this country, of course, to just take their natural course, and we will see what happens, or otherwise these people. But can I just say to you, actually, Gary, when I interviewed Eddie last, he's already been in jail, this guy, and he said to me that because he firmly believes that the end of the world is nigh and that it's not worth bringing kids into this world and it's not really worth getting a proper job because there's no point, he doesn't really actually care about going to jail, Gary.
Well, he may not care, but people who've never been in jail, other people may care. Something has got to be done. I mean, sport is such an easy target, isn't it? And this is not the first time it's happened. I wasn't actually referring to what should happen to these people because I know that the police are involved, but they got the Grand National last week. It's going to happen again. It's going to encourage people. You're not going to have a news blackout. That would be an answer. But, I mean, I'm a journalist. I understand the value of these pictures, reporting it. So I'm not recommending a news blackout, but that is an answer. Because the protesters are looking for 15 seconds of fame, aren't they? They're looking for their cause. But I think some of the people jump on the bandwagon anyway.
Do you think there is something to it, though, Gary, about the idea that... I mean, they wouldn't try this at a snooker club, would they? Because I dare say that something rather nasty might happen to them. And I just wonder whether or not, when you look at the optics of people who, certainly in the case of Phoebe Plummer, who is a renowned activist for this lot, who's been to a 30-odd grand a year private school and things, and whether or not getting involved with, you know, ordinary people who've paid their hard-working money to go and watch a sporting event for a bit of enjoyment. I mean, they're not exactly making any friends here, are they, for their cause?
No, but they don't care, do they? It's because of the worldwide television cameras. If you look at all the protests, they're done when the television camera is live and when it's going around the world. The Grand National, I mean, it is terrible that horses do lose their lives. I'm not against the Grand National. I'm all for it. I think it's a great race and these things happen. But at the end of the day, it is the attraction of putting their cause in, or they want to join in a protest with worldwide cameras there. They know that they're going to make the news. They know that you're going to spend time on it and other news outlets as well. And that's what it's about. It's about the publicity.
Yeah, Gary, look, thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to talk to you as well. Gary Newborn there, who's a sports broadcaster, an institution, really, of the sports broadcasting world. Loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. That was the breaking news, though. The Just Stop Oil protests have been bailed. But, yes, stand by for some shocking figures as it emerges that some patients have been left waiting more than 2 days for an ambulance. Can you imagine waiting 2 days for an ambulance? And there's more details about the King's coronation, including a special coronation quiche, believe it or not. I have been putting together my own food menu. I will be bringing that to you again at the end of this hour. I want your suggestions. What do you think should be on the special coronation menu? GB Views and gbnews.uk. But now it's your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Patrick, thank you and good afternoon. It's 4:30. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The SNP treasurer has been arrested by police investigating the party's finances. Colin Beattie is the second person to be questioned by detectives who are trying to establish how more than £600,000 in donations set aside for an independence referendum had been used. Earlier this month, the Scottish National Party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, was questioned for more than 11 hours. Mr Murrell, who's the husband of former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, was released without charge pending further investigation. Labour is demanding transparency, calling on the Prime Minister to publish his financial interests today. Parliament's ethics watchdog's investigating whether Rishi Sunak failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major announcement in last month's budget. She holds shares in Koru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to recruit more childminders. Number 10 says Mr Sunak will clarify why it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. Charities and campaigners are warning new rules for energy suppliers don't go far enough. Firms across England, Scotland and Wales have agreed to a new voluntary code of practice to help protect vulnerable people. The End Fuel Poverty Coalition says the plans failed to deal with energy debt relief for those most in need. And two police forces, Surrey and Sussex, have been reprimanded for unlawfully recording over 200,000 phone calls. The Information Commissioner's Office says it occurred after an app was rolled out in 2016, which also captured personal data. The recordings, likely with victims, witnesses and perpetrators, happened without their knowledge. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. You're with GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
Welcome back. Let's get to the latest drama surrounding the SNP, shall we? And after the Treasurer, Colin Beattie, has been arrested in connection with an investigation into their finances. It comes 2 weeks after former SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrell was released without charge, pending further investigation. Murrell is, of course, Nicola Sturgeon's husband. Well, can you imagine a worse backdrop for Humza Yousaf's first policy statement as Scotland's First Minister? He told the Scottish Parliament that his government would focus on three main missions: equality, opportunity and community. But in a Q&A, opposition leader, Deputy Leader Megan Gallagher called for him to suspend his predecessor Nicola Sturgeon and her husband Peter Murrell.
I would say to Megan Gallagher, it's awfully brave to talk about a global cost of living crisis. We're dealing with a Tory Westminster cost of living crisis. It is brave. Some may use another word for it when it comes to talking about propriety. Your Prime Minister, your Deputy Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister are all under investigation by the Standards Commission. So yes, while we face challenges, while we absolutely face challenges, I'd rather be standing here with the opportunity to deliver for the people of Scotland rather than languishing in the opposition like Megan Gallagher and the Scottish Tories.
Right, well, there we go. Let's speak now to data journalist at The Spectator. It's Michael Simmons. Michael, thanks for joining us. I mean, look, he's copping it from everywhere, isn't he? The Tories, vast swathes of the public, the media and Labour as well. Has Humza Yousaf already got his card marked here, do we think?
I think so, and he's in a bed or a mess of his own kind of making, because he presented himself in the election campaign, as you and I have discussed before, as the continuity candidate, and that is what got him elected. But the problem with being the continuity candidate is you're associated with what went before, and every day now there's some new story, allegation or police development that sort of damages the reputation of those who have gone before. I mean, if we just think about this speech that Humza Yousaf was giving in the Parliament today, that was the idea, was to reset his leadership and move it onto policies, show how he was different from what went before. But even saying that is ridiculous. You know, he's only been in the job a matter of weeks and he already needs a reset moment. So I think for Humza, it's already looking difficult about how he escapes his association with his predecessors.
Well, and there are massive question marks over his political acumen anyway, aren't there, given his previous roles and his, some would argue, inability to do them. You mentioned there about there being another news development today and another ongoing instalment of this saga. Could you just fill us in about what we know? My understanding is that Colin Beattie has been arrested, the treasurer of the party. Is that right?
Yes, so Colin Beattie, who's also an MSP, was the SNP's national treasurer for years until he lost that position in 2020 to Douglas Chapman in an internal election. But Douglas Chapman then went on to resign when this kind of scandal kicked off, because he said that he wasn't able to see the books, or he wasn't able to have enough information to do his job as treasurer. At that point, Colin Beattie comes back in as treasurer and continues in that role. Now, we can just assume that the police are interested in something that may or may not have gone on, or certainly allegations, during either his first stint or second stint as treasurer.
And Nicola Sturgeon, again, is copying it, strong calls for her to stand down as an SNP, to quit as an MSP, easy mistake, to quit the party because of a lack of transparency. Is that right?
Yes, so certainly in the past, there's been cases where members of the SNP in Parliament have been investigated for different things, and they've been suspended from the whip, or they've even had their party membership suspended during those investigations. So there's been calls, certainly from Scottish Labour at the weekend and the Tories today, that Humza should do the same with Nicola Sturgeon. Now, he's reluctant to do that. We'll say his hands are tied because he doesn't want to prejudge anyone. But I think those calls are only going to get louder. I also think it's interesting that there was a statement yesterday from Nicola Sturgeon that she would not be returning to Parliament this week. She would be attending virtually. So I think that speaks for itself.
Well, there we go. Thank you very much, Michael, as ever, for keeping us bang up to date on what's going on north of the border in Scotland. No doubt in the last 5 minutes we've been speaking, something else will have kicked off now. But that's data journalist at The Spectator, Michael Simmons. Right, OK, so some patients have been left waiting for more than 2 days for an ambulance to arrive, or stuck outside hospitals waiting to just walk into A&E. Can you imagine waiting 2 days for an ambulance? The shocking figures were revealed by Labour after they made freedom of information requests. One patient waited for 65 hours for a response to a Category 3 call, even though Category 3 conditions are not immediately life-threatening. These cases are supposed to be reached within 2 hours. And another example showed the longest waits after a Category 2 call, which can include people having heart attacks or a stroke, was 21 hours. And the target is 18 minutes. Joining me now is Catherine Forster, GB News' political reporter. How damning are these figures?
They're horrendous, aren't they? Yeah. I mean, obviously, these instances were the absolute worst, but 2.5 days for an ambulance for Category 3, and I think even more shocking, over a day for somebody in the East Midlands, Category 2, that's heart attack or strokes, where, you know, treatment within minutes make such a difference. And somebody waited over a day. Now, the target is 18 minutes. And the average in December was an hour and a half for Category 2 across England. Now, it's important to say December was the absolute worst month. In January for Category 2, heart attack, strokes, the average was 39 minutes. That's still way ahead of the 18 minutes. But I think what's going on is Labour obviously are campaigning ahead of the local elections. This week they're focusing on health, and they are getting all these terrible figures out to push the message that they say public services, the NHS particularly in crisis, not delivering for people. You should be able, especially in terms of needing an ambulance when you're in dire need, the service isn't there, and blaming this, of course, on the government and 13 years of Conservative rule.
And just in terms of when these figures are from, I mean, look, just some of them, people will probably be thinking, yeah, well, some of these things coincide with when they were on a strike, were they? I mean, is that part of it, do we think?
There were strikes, but the thing is, these figures have been terrible now for months. December was the worst possible, but the strikes were a factor, sure, but that's only a small part of the picture. And, you know, NHS providers were saying it's very complicated, but a combination of high demand, overstretched capacity, etc., and also the strikes. But certainly much better than that now, but still a way off this 18 minutes, and a feeling really that the NHS is not delivering for people. Taxes are an all-time high, and yet we're not getting the services. And Labour are hoping that in focusing on this now, this is going to bring votes for them at the local elections.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's part of a massive advertising campaign, it must be said, some with more success than others. And Catherine, thank you very, very much. Catherine Forster, our political reporter. I am just being informed that I've got to give you some breaking news now. And Conservative MP David Mundell is under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog. Mundell is the MP for Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweedale. He is the 7th current or former Tory MP who is the subject of an open investigation. Yesterday it emerged that Rishi Sunak is under investigation over a possible failure to make a declaration to MPs. I'll read that breaking news to you again because it's just come through to me now live on air. So Conservative MP David Mundell is under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog. Mundell is the MP for Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweedale, and he is the 7th current or former Tory MP who is the subject of an open investigation. Yesterday, of course, it did emerge that Rishi Sunak is under investigation over a possible failure to make a declaration to MPs. That's just come through to us. We'll have more on that as and when we get it. Now, moving away from that, one supermarket has increased the price of cheddar cheese by 8%. 80%. I was going to say 8% is not that much. It should have a security tag on it if it's up by 80%. Is that just blatant profiteering? And this is something I was wondering. I don't think enough is being spoken about whether or not big companies are actually shamelessly profiteering as a result of they're blaming Brexit for things, they're blaming the cost of living crisis, they're blaming the war in Ukraine. I've got no doubt that these things are having an impact, but are big companies shamelessly profiteering at your expense and making your lives worse? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, food staples, including cheese, white bread and porridge, have soared in price over the last year, according to the latest Which inflation figures. Budget supermarkets like Lidl and Aldi are reporting the biggest surge in prices, putting more pressure on millions of squeezed households. Let's get more analysis from our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Yeah, whiz us through this, Liam, and I am also keen to drill down on whether or not big companies are actually profiteering over several perceived crises that seem to be gripping this country at the minute?
I think there is obviously a general inflation atmosphere, high prices are everywhere, and I do think some retailers in some sectors are taking advantage of that, particularly in food retailing. Because if you look at wholesale food prices on global markets, on national markets, the prices that farmers charge for the stuff, or farmers are allowed to charge by their big purchasers, then they have been going down. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Index, that's a global measure of food prices, has been going down for 12 months in a row. And yet actual food price inflation that shoppers are experiencing in supermarkets is going up. And we know that because of a survey that was out today, as if we don't know that already. So, the consumer group, which they do tremendous work. They surveyed 26,000 products across 8 supermarkets. They found out that in February, food price inflation was up 16.5% compared to February the year before. But in March, that went up to 17.2%, even though wholesale food prices are coming down. And what does that mean? Well, we can see on the next graphic what's actually happening. At Asda, an 800-gram slice of white bread is up 67% on the year to March. Ocado, you want your 49-gram porridge pot to get you going in the morning, Patrick, and keep you regular? That'll cost you 66...
I'm more of an 8 sausages.
66% more. And then your 8 sausages from Tesco, they are up 73% on the year.
It's mad, isn't it?
It is absolutely insane. And during this period, for much of the year, food prices on wholesale markets have actually been coming down. And tomorrow we've got the inflation figures coming out from the Office for National Statistics, and in there will be a breakdown of food inflation. And what I expect to happen tomorrow, which is very much to your point, is I expect overall inflation to be coming down from like 10.1%, where it was in February, into single digits in March. But I think food price inflation will be going up.
But how can they justify this? Why are they saying now that they need to be hiking up the price of just basic stuff like that?
Okay.
To this extent.
So what they will say is it's the food that appears on your supermarket shelves. It isn't just about the food; it's about the packaging, and the packaging is made of often oil, hydrocarbons, plastics. The price of them has been quite high. There's a lot of labour involved in food processing, food transportation. Obviously, the cost of labour's gone up. We've seen wage inflation. But I don't think the big supermarkets can justify the price rises that we're still seeing. And that's why, and I've been writing about this for several weeks now, I think tomorrow is where the rubber will hit the road, because politicians will finally realise that the reason inflation isn't coming down faster, the reason that we aren't certain that interest rates will come down soon, the reason that there's still this kind of funk and despondency over consumers, the reasons we haven't really recovered, even though the weather's getting a bit better economically, is because food prices are still going up. 16, 17% inflation, far higher than the general rate of inflation. And disproportionately, the less well-off, the vulnerable, they spend a bigger share of their incomes on food. That's why this is so politically sensitive.
Indeed. I mean, are they also hiding behind things like Brexit and stuff like that?
I think Brexit often gets the blame, but I think it's about the structure of the food retailing industry. Oh, and by the way, Eurozone food price inflation is roughly the same as us. So it's got nothing to do with Brexit at all, because when I last looked, France and Germany hadn't left the European Union. Maybe I'm a bit behind the curve. So it's not about Brexit. It's about the fact that in the supply chain for food, which is complex, the farmers have very little power, but the retailers have enormous power. And I think a lot of retailers, I'm not saying those names that we've already mentioned, they're not here to defend themselves. As an economist, when I look at wholesale food prices going down a lot, and I look at retail food prices going up a lot, you got to say, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's fantastic that we highlight it as well. Now, before talking of food, I get your hot take on my Coronation menu food spectacular. Yeah, I know. Highbrow stuff here, Liam. You've got a couple of other bits and bobs for us. It's been a big day for economic news in general, hasn't it?
It has. And I wanted to mention the pay numbers, because they came out this morning. The inflation numbers will be out tomorrow. I'll be here on GB News breakfast show reporting them at 7 a.m. for my sins. But the pay numbers came out today, and pay during the 3 months to February, so it's December, January, February, was up 6.6%. But, of course, inflation was much higher during that period. So real wages after inflation actually went down by 2.3%. So that's 3 month period that I just mentioned compared to the same month 3-month period 12 months earlier. So real wages, again, are down. And public sector pay went up by 5.3% during that period, and private sector pay went up by 6.7%. So there is still a lot of wage inflation out there, but it's not enough to overcome actual inflation. So your real wages, the amount of purchasing power you have, the stuff you can buy, actually is still going down.
OK, all right. Now, slightly off topic, but are you a fan of quiche?
I do like quiche. I'm quite good at making quiche. I can bake blind.
You what?
You don't know what that is, do you?
Bake blind?
Yeah.
No,
That's how you make a quiche, mate.
That's how you make a quiche.
You have to bake
I've
it
never
blind.
heard anyone say that in such a threatening way as Liam Halligan looked me in the eye. Yeah, that's how you bake a quiche.
So look, you get the pastry and you put it in the quiche pan, and then you put greaseproof paper over it, and then you put baking beans inside, and then you stick the thing in the oven. So you just get the baked pastry case, then you glaze it with eggs, stick it back in again, and that's why when you put the liquid in, it doesn't, you know, the milk and the eggs and cheese and all the nice stuff, it doesn't go soggy.
Well, there you go. You're not a fan of a soggy bottom, clearly, as well. But right, so speaking of food, guests at the Coronation big lunch at Westminster Abbey today were served up the King and Queen Consort's favourite quiche Lorraine. King Charles III is said that he adores anything with eggs and cheese, and the royal family's website described it as a deep quiche with a crisp, light pastry case and delicate flavours of spinach, broad beans and fresh tarragon.
I like a bit of tarragon.
So I've drifted off there for a minute. That sounds amazing, doesn't it? But there we go. Sounds absolutely delicious. But, what else will be dished up on the big day? So I put some thought into this for once in my life, and I came up with what I think will be a winning banquet suitable for a king, OK? So this is my own coronation spectacular. You start off with a cocktail, Kir Royale, bit of a royal theme there. Nothing like a cocktail, get the taste buds going, OK? Next up, they get stuck into a starter of coronation chicken, salad, so a nod to the past, but also, of course, quite light and refreshing. So we're still in relatively healthy territory here. Now, for the main course, is the pièce de résistance, is a fillet of beef Prince Albert. And look, in case you're wondering, yes, of course, there'll be all the trimmings, possibly a red wine jus. It's a dish named in honour of the husband of Queen Victoria. So I think we're off to a flyer here. So what better way to round things off with a just simple, good British dessert of Victoria sponge cake, a culinary delight conjured up during the Victorian era. That would be my coronation menu. Liam, would you add anything to that? Would you change it?
The thing I'd say about the coronation chicken, you say it's a nod to the past, because, of course, it was a dish sort of conjured up for when Princess Elizabeth was... the coronation happened in 1953. But it's also kind of a nod to the future from the past, because, of course, the thing that makes coronation chicken, is the mild curry powder that you put in. And hey, presto, here we are, 70-odd years on, and what's Britain's favourite dish? It's not fish and chips anymore. It's chicken tikka masala.
Yeah, exactly.
So there you go. So it's a nod to the past and a nod to the future.
Yeah, 100%. And this is it. I was getting a lot of suggestions in. Someone went very literal on this. I think it was Brian. I haven't got the email in front of me now. He said king prawns.
Yeah, not bad, not bad.
You can see that. Fish and chips did score highly.
Oh, yeah.
But can you imagine... what did you reckon?
The Queen Mum liked fish and chips.
Really?
With her gin and tonic.
I was going to say 11 o'clock in the morning.
She's betting on the races.
At 11 o'clock in the morning, now I've got my fish and chips, my gin and tonic. Doner meat and chips was a suggestion, which I don't think is going to have much... no? Can you imagine...
I'm a shish man myself.
You're a shish man, are you? Well, there we go. All right, Liam, thank you.
I'm not so out of it that I can't afford to wait 4 minutes for my kebab.
No, exactly. I mean, also, as well, you've got a rough chance of knowing exactly what animal it is, if it's a shish, isn't it? So there we are. All right, will you be doing anything massive on Coronation Day? Will you be eating quiche at a garden party?
I think I'm actually playing... I've got a gig with my little band. We're playing at a local pub.
Plug them. Who are they?
The Hooligans.
Yes. Traditional
Irish music on Coronation Day. You couldn't have done that 70 years ago. There'd have been a riot.
Well, there would have been, actually, yeah, that's true, How times have changed. Liam Halligan there, economics and business editor and a food guru for a period of time there. But look, thank you very much, everyone who's been getting in touch with your thoughts on all of this. I'm going to go now. Who have I got? I've got Keith. Keith thinks that quiche is a little bit unambitious. He thinks it's a little bit bland and it's a little bit low red. But can I just say on the quiche front, Keith, what they're trying to say is you can serve it hot or cold. Apparently, it's not that difficult to make, and Liam Halligan explained that to us perfectly. He doesn't want a soggy bottom and he'd need to bake it blind. So there we go. And basically, it means that you can take it to one of your garden parties and you don't really have to worry about it being, like I said, hot or cold, and it's perfect for sharing. And as well, it is suitable for vegetarians. So there you go. It's a modern world that we live in. Now, keep your views coming in. GBViews at GBNews. I'm going to give you a little bit of a coming up as to what I've got. 2 Just Stop Oil activists were arrested after disrupting the World Snooker Championships last night. I want to know, is this a case of rich, spoilt people trying to disrupt ordinary working-class people's lives? And in other news as well, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the fact that apparently Labour in Wales wants to give asylum seekers £1,600 a month, plus legal aid, just for being there, really. That is around double the state pension, a little bit more, actually. What do you make of that? Do you think that is fair? In fact, they're going to be paying them more than they were paying the former head of UK immigration. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, everybody. It's just about to go 5 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. A busy, busy final hour to this show. So here's what's on the menu. Give us a break. I know. So the 2 Just Stop Oil activists who ran roughshod across the crucible yesterday have actually been bailed. But I'm looking at whether or not this is quite an elitist group of posh people who like to disrupt working class people's sport. What do you make of that? In other news, £1,600 a day. Yes, that's right. Or a month even. A month. To people who have come across the channel living in Wales. Now, what do you make of all of that? As well, of course, as taxpayer-funded legal aid, so a lot of money. And should we be naming kids who kill? A teenager has now been named and his picture has been published as well after a judge decided that it was in the public interest to do so. Do you think that's right, or do you think it is against their human rights? I want to know what you think about all of that. And finally, as well, yes, very much a shift in tone. This is on the menu for the Coronation Day. It's quiche Lorraine, but I've been taking a look at what you, lovely, wonderful people, would like to see on the royal menu instead for a banquet fit for a king. Patrick Christys on GB News. Can you imagine if it was 1,600 quid a day? That would be a story, wouldn't it? Right, get your views coming in on all of that. I want to know whether or not you think it's right and fair that asylum seekers in Wales will be given £1,600 a month plus taxpayer-funded legal aid under plans by the Welsh Labour government. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And, of course, get your culinary delights coming in thick and fast. Right now, though, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. It's 5:01. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The SNP treasurer has been arrested by police investigating the party's finances. Colin Beattie is the second person to be questioned by detectives who are trying to establish how more than £600,000 in donations set aside for an independence referendum had been used. Earlier this month, the Scottish National Party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, was questioned for more than 11 hours. Mr Murrell, who's the husband of former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, was released without charge, pending further investigation. When questioned in Holyrood, SNP leader Humza Yousaf hit back at the Conservatives.
It is brave, some may use another word for it, when it comes to talking about propriety. Your Prime Minister, your Deputy Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister are all under investigation by the Standards Commission. So yes, while we face challenges, while we absolutely face challenges, I'd rather be standing here with the opportunity to deliver for the people of Scotland rather than languishing in the opposition like Megan Gallagher and the Scottish Tories.
The Scottish First Minister also set out his vision for the country in his first major policy statement since taking office. Mr Yousaf said the party will focus on equality, opportunity and community. He also announced a delay in the deposit return scheme for drinks cans and bottles, as well as a 6-month trial to remove peak time fares from ScotRail trains. Labour's demanding transparency, calling on the Prime Minister to publish his financial interest today. Parliament's ethics watchdogs investigating whether Rishi Sunak failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major announcement in last month's budget. She holds shares in Coru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to recruit more childminders. Number 10 says Mr Sunak will clarify why it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, wants the Prime Minister to come clean.
I think transparency really does matter, and the Prime Minister did promise transparency and integrity, and so he does have to clear this up and declare what his interest is. The Ministerial Register has not been published for nearly a year, so I think for the Prime Minister today, he should publish his part of the register, clear this up and be open about this issue.
An American journalist has lost an appeal against his detention in Russia. Evan Gershkovich will be held in a prison in Moscow until at least the 29th of May on charges of espionage. Mr. Gershkovich, who works for the Wall Street Journal, is accused of trying to obtain military secrets on behalf of Washington and faces a possible 20-year sentence if convicted. The newspaper says the charges are a vicious affront to a free press. Speaking outside the court, the US ambassador to Russia, Lynn Tracy, called for his immediate release.
I can report that he is in good health and remains strong despite his circumstances. We will continue to provide all appropriate support to Evan and his family, and we expect Russian authorities to provide continued consular access to Evan. The charges against Evan are baseless, and we call on the Russian Federation to immediately release him.
More machetes and zombie knives could be banned in England and Wales, with criminals who buy or sell them facing up to 2 years in prison. Under plans, police could also be given new powers to seize and destroy weapons. Home Office Minister Chris Philp told GB News the move would make communities safer.
It will be a criminal offence to manufacture, supply, import or possess these dangerous knives in private. There's no reason to have these knives, no legitimate use. They are only used by criminals to intimidate and threaten the public, or indeed to engage in inter-gang warfare. That's why we're taking decisive action today to make these dangerous knives illegal.
Charities and campaigners are warning new rules for energy supplies don't go far enough. Firms across England, Scotland and Wales have agreed to a new voluntary code of practice to help protect vulnerable people. Under the new rules, suppliers must make at least 10 attempts to contact a customer and carry out a welfare visit before a prepayment meter can be installed. The End Fuel Poverty Coalition says the plans fail to deal with energy debt relief for those most in need. Free-range eggs are returning to the shelves with restrictions to prevent the spread of bird flu now lifted. From today, hens which have been kept indoors since November are now allowed to roam freely again. The government says the bird flu risk levels have been reduced to medium. Experts say despite the relaxation of restrictions, the disease still exists in the wild bird population. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, I do start with some breaking news from the last hour that two Just Stop Oil activists who were arrested after disrupting the World Snooker Championships have now been released on bail. It comes following the latest stunt performed by Just Stop Oil. One of the activists who caused havoc last night is a full-time student who just 2 weeks ago told GB News on this very show, he had a chat with me, that he opposes having children on moral grounds, doesn't see the point of getting a proper job as well. Eddie Whittingham invaded the playing area at Sheffield's Crucible Theatre and covered one of the snooker tables in orange paint powder. There Eddie goes. Lovely stuff. OK, all right. Whittingham was wearing a T-shirt with the slogan Just Stop Oil as he interrupted the match between Robert Milkins and Joe Perry. He and one other person were this afternoon bailed until June. Now, Eddie is a familiar face on this show. I've interviewed him twice, actually, but the last time I spoke to him was on March the 31st. And, well, here's some stuff about Eddie. I'm just keen to know, what do you want to do after university? What's your big ambition? What kind of line of work are you going to go into?
My dream is to be a writer, but any vocation, any dream is looking precarious if we don't sort out the climate crisis.
So are you genuinely so fearful that the world is going to end within your lifetime that you don't care particularly about future employment prospects or anything like that? You are just so convinced that you're going to see the end of the world?
Well, I already have decided that I won't be having children because I can't guarantee that there will be a habitable planet for them to grow up into. OK, is that a difficult decision for you? I mean, that's quite a bold decision to make, isn't it? Well, I think it's the moral choice, given the circumstances that we're facing.
So morally, you think it would be wrong to bring more children into this world?
If we don't sort out the climate crisis.
Well, there we go. Joining me now for a bit of a debate on this is Just Stop Oil spokesperson Francis Davies. Also joining me is the political commentator Danny Kelly. Francis, thank you very, very much. Look, I'll just start where Eddie left off, if you don't mind. I mean, do you think it would be immoral for us to bring more children into this world as it currently stands?
Hi, thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, my name's Francis. I'm 20 years old. I'm from Norwich. I work in a cafe. And I'm taking action with Just Stop Oil. And we are demanding that the UK government halt all new future oil and gas licences in the UK. But I'm sure we all know this now. It's a total no-brainer demand. And we've been saying it for over a year.
All right, OK. We'll just ask you to just answer that question, if that's all right. Do you think that we should, until we get your demands all sorted, we should be not reproducing? We don't want to bring children into this horrible world, do we, Francis?
Well, personally, I would agree with Eddie. I couldn't bring myself to bring a child into this world when I can't guarantee that I could keep them safe, when I can't guarantee that I can actually feed them. You know, we're looking at total societal collapse, and by that, I mean the collapse of our food systems. And we already are seeing this. You know, last year there was a 40-degree heat wave. I'm from Norfolk. It's a big agricultural hub. You know, where I live, there was a wildfire caused by flints getting too hot in this heat wave, which caused the loss of over 100 acres of barley. Over 100 acres. You know, we are seeing this. So no.
OK.
Why would you bring children into that?
OK, look, Danny, you've heard that. Respond to any of that you like. I would also like to get your views on whether or not, when you see protests taking place at events like the snooker, for example, traditionally a working-class man and woman's sport, right, whether or not you think that maybe there are some elements of this Just Stop Oil group who are quite well off themselves, potentially, who are targeting the working class here. Your views?
Well, looking at this objectively as possible, I don't think there's necessarily a class element to this. I know that Just Stop Oil tend to be highly educated university-type people, or indeed retirees who are well-to-do vocational job people like, priests and vicars and justices of the peace and all of that. You don't tend to see many working-class men and women on it, not that I can see anyway. Just Stop Oil have been going for 2 or 3 years, and their main and their primary motivation is to basically change government legislation. Now, 1.5 million people marched in 2003 to London to try and get Tony Blair to stop the dreadful, with hindsight, decision to get in bed with George Bush and go to Iraq. So what a handful of these zealots are going to achieve. I would ask my opponents what they have achieved so far. They've achieved absolutely nothing. And to have Eddie jump on a snooker table and ruin the experience for hundreds of people, I think it's unforgivable. We know what your point is, and I don't think it's achievable. You're not achieving anything. Can you point me in the direction of one thing that you've actually achieved that you can put on your CV to say, yes, we've actually started to change government legislation, please?
OK. Well, Francis, do you want to answer that then?
Yes, I absolutely can. The Labour Party has adopted our demand. The Sydney Opera House is divesting from fossil fuels. So HSBC is divesting from fossil fuels, all because of the fact that the campaigns like Just Stop Oil have raised the level of tension on this issue. People know that we are in a climate crisis because these campaigns, Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion before them, we, and still, in fact, have raised the issue. This was not being talked about. This was being swept under the rug. Everybody knows what's coming, and it's terrible. It's terrifying, and we are winning, and we can win.
If that was to highlight this to Sydney Opera House as some sort of government legislation is quite farcical. So if you're saying that the Labour government are going to stop new oil rigs, why don't you just leave everybody to their own and to watch snooker and to navigate around the capital and wait for a Labour government then? You're not going to change conservative legislation. All you're doing is marginalising yourselves even further.
All right, so you're saying we don't have time, Francis?
We don't have time. Sir David King, the chief scientific advisor to 3 or 4 different governments, has said that what we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity. He said that over a year ago. We do not have time. Normal political discourse has failed us, and now we have to look back in history at the suffragettes, the civil rights movement, the Indian independence movement. I can carry on listing them.
On that,
we know non-violent direct action is what needs to be done.
OK, on that, Danny, there have been similarities drawn, I think it must be said, mostly by people like Francis, with the suffragettes.
It's an inappropriate, it's a false equivalence. The suffragettes had 50%. I'll explain why, if you let me. The suffragettes had at least 50% of the nation behind them, i.e. 50% of women. They also had a lot of blokes behind them. 60,000 people tried to break into Parliament in order to change the government's mind. You haven't got that support. So please stop rewriting history in a false manner to support your shaky case.
How do you respond to that, Francis, that people are a bit sick and tired of climate alarmism because people are saying that for decades they've been hearing about we've only got 2 more years to save the world, there's going to be an ice age, or the Maldives are going to be completely underwater by now, and all of this stuff, OK? And that maybe people are a bit weary of it, Francis. How do you respond to that?
I think they're probably more scared about the climate crisis, you know? Can you imagine what it feels like to be 20 years old today and have every opportunity that you could have in your life ripped away by the government that is actively investing in what is frankly genocide? They know that they are investing in a product that is going to cause the total annihilation of whole countries, whole cultures, whole groups of people. You know, they know that, your viewers know that, we all know that, and they are going ahead with it. You know,
Francis,
we've
can I
been
ask you...
back in the corner here, and we've
Danny,
tried
one more quickly.
everything else. I'm sorry, can I just finish my point? I led 7,000 students out on strike, on school strikes, and we were ignored. 7,000 students. You know,
Okay. Why don't you fly to China?
We've tried
Protest
signing
in China.
petitions. We've
Protest
tried going
in
on
India.
marches. We've tried going on
You're
strikes.
preaching to the
Francis,
converted.
So what Danny's saying there, Francis, is why not go to China and do it?
Well, because I'm a British citizen.
Yeah, but even if we did everything...
an influence over my government. They're supposed to listen to me. They have a duty to protect me. And my
I think that's such a poor excuse. If you genuinely believe that the Earth is going to implode, explode, we're at the end of times, for you to say that you're only 20, you're a British citizen, yet you're not prepared to get a one-way flight to China with your British passport is such... Your argument is like a colander. It's full of holes when people actually shine a mirror up to it.
Are you a bit... Is that right, Francis? Are you a bit frit of China?
Look, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, have said we can have no new oil.
He's not answering,
the
Patrick.
United Nations have said this. Over 700 top scientists and Sir David King have said this. Should your viewers really listen to them or Danny Kelly?
No, you're not answering the question. Why don't you protest in China?
They are protesting in China. We know that. The whole A22 network is around the world.
Why don't you and Eddie, 25-year-old Eddie?
All right, OK, just one... Look, no, to be fair, I think you've made your point. I'm going to interject here, both of you. I'm going to interject here, both of you. That's right, because I've enjoyed it. Just one quick one, Francis. Can I just ask, what do your parents make what you're doing? Or are they bang on board? I'm always intrigued to know a bit of the backstory about people, if that's all right, if you don't mind me asking. You don't have to answer, to be fair.
My parents support me because they want me to have a livable future.
Okay.
You know, they want me to have a life. They want me to have a career. They want me to have a family.
Okay.
They want me to have grandchildren. And they know that I'm doing everything that I can to protect that.
OK. All right. Thank you very much, both of you. Francis Davies there, who is Just Stop Oil spokesperson. And that was political commentator as well. Danny Kelly. Right, fiery stuff at the start, if you'll excuse the pun. Anyway, last night's incident at the World Snooker Championships was just the latest in a long line of high-profile protests staged by Just Stop Oil. In July last year, 6 people were arrested at the British Grand Prix after 5 activists invaded the track. All 6 were convicted of causing a public nuisance and received suspended sentences and community orders. Last October, activists brought traffic to a standstill in central London. Earlier this month, 6 people were found guilty of willful obstruction of the highway. Also, in October 2022, Just Stop Oil protesters slapped a load of cake in the face of a waxwork of King Charles at Madame Tussauds. In November 2022, Just Stop Oil staged 4 days of protests on the M25. A total of 58 people were charged. 1 activist was jailed for 6 months. And then last night, Just Stop Oil targeted the World Snooker Championships in Sheffield, and 2 people were arrested. They've now been bailed. Right, moving on, because I've got some more big breaking news for you, and this time it's regarding the small boats crisis. GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White joins me now. Mark, what is this breaking news?
Well, the Home Secretary will effectively declare the small boats crisis as a national emergency tomorrow. That is because of a court case that has been launched by council in Essex, Braintree Council, that's trying to get a High Court injunction to stop the government going ahead with putting 1,700 young male asylum seekers in a former RAF base there in Wethersfield in Essex. So in order to declare an emergency so that they can impose particular rules, planning rules that relate to Crown estates, the government will declare this a national emergency. So that will allow them to override the individual planning objections of a local authority, and where it's Crown property, Crown land, such as a Ministry of Defence base, they will then, if the High Court agrees with the government, they will then be able to ignore that local planning objection and put these plans in place.
This is potentially absolutely massive, actually. So it could well be that these people that we're seeing at various RAF sites or these Crown land sites who had, as they felt, solid legal objections could be completely blown out the water because the government will say this is a national emergency and therefore, in a way, I'm commandeering this.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think it could be very significant indeed, because we know that Braintree Council is launching this bid for an injunction. There are similar plans to stop the process of an asylum-seeking accommodation centre at RAF Scampton. We know, of course, if we think back to last year and the protests over Linton-on-Ouse, that the uproar and the threat of a High Court legal injunction there by the council in Yorkshire also halted those plans. So yes, if the High Court agrees that the government does have the right to declare this a national emergency, then that would allow the government to introduce what's known as Class Q, that gives them the right to ignore local planning objections. Wow. And as long as it's Crown estate, Crown land, like a Ministry of Defence base, they can go ahead with their plans if it's in the interests of serving the best way of dealing with a national emergency.
Look, this is just popped into my head now. I don't expect you to have the answer to this, by the way. But when it comes to things like the proposed boats off Birkenhead or Dorset, could they potentially be considered Crown property? No. Because if the government's buying them...
I don't think so, not in terms of this Class Q option that the government has to ignore local planners. Has to be their land. Now, there may be different provisions they can enact for ports around the country if it is under national emergency legislation. I guess we'll only know that when it comes to the point that someone launches a legal challenge against that. We know, for instance, that there are plans to put about 500-odd young male asylum seekers on a barge in Portland and Dorset. We're hearing today about plans also to put up to 1,800 asylum seekers on a large vessel in Birkenhead. Now, that's been objected to by 3 of the area's local MPs in the Wirral, who say that it's inhumane, that it's an abrogation of the British government's, duty really to look after these asylum seekers that land here on our shores. So whether there's actually a local authority or other type of challenge in the courts, then we'll see what happens with regard to what the government's argument is.
Look, Mark, thank you very much for that. That is, of course, the breaking news that the Home Secretary is to declare that the small boats crisis is a national emergency and those additional powers that come with it. Mark White, thank you, our Home Security Editor. What will that mean for, frankly, a town or a place near you? So it would appear, anyway, that your local authority or local residents or people involved with this would now just be pushed to one side and the government could just plough straight on and plonk a asylum seeker camp somewhere in an area near you, as long as it's Crown land. What do you make of that? That is the breaking news just dropped right now. Moving away from that, though, now, a judge says that naming teenage murderer Leighton Amies is in the public interest and would act as a deterrent to other would-be killers. This got me thinking, is it right to name and produce the mugshots of, in this case, 14 years old, this lad, when he stabbed another teenager to death? Is that right? Do children, essentially, forgo their human rights on this, their rights to privacy, when they commit a crime that awful? I want to know what you think about that. Should we name child killers? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today. Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Yeah, welcome back. A reminder now of that breaking news that we brought to you just moments ago. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, will effectively declare the small boat crisis a national emergency tomorrow. And this, as we understand it, will grant the government more powers, if it is upheld, to use various different Crown-owned sites as centres for either migrant processing or migrant housing and accommodation. So there we go. Right. The Home Office, though, in other news, has proposed to ban knives such as machetes and zombie knives, which have no practical use. And the news comes a day after a judge allowed the media to name the 15-year-old boy who stabbed and killed a teenager in a park. Leighton Amies was just 14 when he murdered Tomasz Oleksak in Gateshead last October. Well, a judge ruled that naming Amies was in the public interest and should act as a deterrent to young people carrying knives. But I wanted to find out whether or not you thought that it was worthwhile naming and shaming and putting their picture out there for all to see, so it'll be in the public domain forever for the rest of their lives, children who commit heinous crimes against other children. Some people will be saying, no doubt, that they lose their human rights at the point when they commit this kind of atrocity. Other people maybe have a different view. Joining me now is Sicarius McGrath, who is a reformed gang member and is a youth rehabilitator. Great to chat to you. Thank you very much. I'll get straight down to it on this. Do you think that judges are right to name publicly 14-year-olds who kill other teenagers?
Yeah, I'd say the judges are right, and it's the correct thing to do, to name perpetrators. Because it's in the public interest. Not only is it in the public interest, but also the victim. Victims in these cases should be prioritised and their rights prioritised as opposed to the right of the perpetrator.
Do you think it would make a 14-year-old carrying a knife any less likely to commit a stupid, needless crime like this in the blink of an eye if they thought that their name and their mugshot was going to be out there for all to see? Or do you think they just don't think about that at the time?
No, if anything, I think it's not going to deter them because they're going to see it as an honourable thing. So they're going to see it as a benefit as opposed to a detriment. And any young person and even some adults would like the publicity of that type of offending because it makes them look of a certain type of character.
Why on earth well, go on. No, carry on.
Yeah, I don't believe it will deter whatsoever, but at the same time, I think it was the right decision which was made by the judge.
You don't think, just to play devil's advocate on this, you don't think that people who are 14 years old maybe very troubled life, hypothetically, make a silly mistake, an awful mistake, and do take someone else's life, if the judge gave them anonymity, then they could serve whatever sentence they're given in a youth rehabilitation centre, get some rehabilitation and come out the other side of it, and their name wouldn't be splashed across the media for everyone to see for all of time. You don't think there's anything to be said for their privacy? Or do they lose their human rights when they commit a murder?
No, I totally against them having... They have to have some human rights to some degree, but I'm totally against them being held anonymous when the victims have got to live with this for the rest of their life. The victim's family have got to live with this, for the rest of their lives. So why should the perpetrators be able to get out and start a life afresh with an identity that's never been smeared for exactly what they've done? Perpetrators should be held to account. Not only held to account, they should be made in the public eye, so the public know exactly who they are and what they've done.
Yeah, and just one last one quickly with you, if that's all right. And you are, of course, a reformed gang member. You're now a youth rehabilitator. It does seem to me that you've got a huge amount of children, and they are kids. And in the case of this particular lad as well, he looks younger than he is. And he was only 14 when he did this murder. You've got a load of kids walking around with knives now, and they're prepared to use them over absolutely nothing. And they're proud of it. How do you stop that?
Yeah, look, banning knives, in my opinion, isn't the solution, and it's not going to create any part of the solution. It's just, if anything, it's going to create a black market of people manufacturing and selling these things. It's going to create an opportunity for financial gain. And also, if these zombie knives aren't available, they'll just resort to carrying your average kitchen knife. And what are we going to do? Where are we going to draw the line? Are we going to ban kitchen knives as well? It makes no sense whatsoever. It's not going to reduce the problem. OK, yet there's no justifiable use for these zombie knives, but banning them isn't the answer. We need to change the ideology of children and the mindsets and the way they think.
Yeah, good stuff. Look, thank you very much. Always a pleasure, and thank you for making time for us today. Sicarius McGrath, who's a reformed gang member and a youth rehabilitator, and he is of the view that we should be naming and shaming these kids who kill. And it does appear from my inbox that most of you are as well. Absolutely, teenage killers should be named as soon as they've been convicted, and that is from Rob. Keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Loads more to come between now and 6 o'clock. I will debate Welsh Labour's policy that would see migrants given £1,600 a month and legal aid as well. That's more than double the state pension. And there's more details about the King's coronation, including a special coronation quiche. But first, here's your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Patrick, thank you and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. As we've been hearing, breaking news this hour, the Home Secretary is set to declare the small boats crisis as a national emergency. It comes as the latest figures show more than 5,000 people have crossed the English Channel so far this year. Downing Street says there's no quick fix to meet the Prime Minister's promise to stop the boats. The SNP treasurer has been arrested by police investigating the party's finances. Colin Beattie is the second person to be questioned by detectives who are trying to establish how more than £600,000 in donations set aside for an independence referendum had been used. Earlier this month, the Scottish National Party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, was questioned for more than 11 hours. Mr Murrell, who's the husband of former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, was released without charge pending further investigation. Labour is demanding transparency, calling on the Prime Minister to publish his financial interests today. Parliament's ethics watchdog is investigating whether Rishi Sunak failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major announcement in last month's budget. She holds shares in Koru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to recruit more childminders. Number 10 says Mr Sunak will clarify why it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. Charities and campaigners are warning new rules for energy suppliers don't go far enough. Firms across England, Scotland and Wales have agreed to a new voluntary code of practice to help protect vulnerable people. The End Fuel Poverty Coalition says the plans fail to deal with energy debt relief for those most in need. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2421 and 1.1333 euros. The price of gold is £1,616. And the FTSE 100 closed on 7,909 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News, Investments That Matter.
Welcome back. Now, Welsh Labour wants to hand out £1,600 a month to young migrants. The payout essentially means that asylum seekers would receive a universal basic income on top of their legal aid. And the proposal was exposed after The Sun saw a letter to Whitehall which showed 3 Welsh Labour ministers backing the plans. The UK government currently spends around £6 million a day on migrant accommodation. Look, to put this in a little bit of context, OK, that £1,600 a month would be more than double the state pension on average. And on top of that, they would get legal aid. And plenty of people in Wales right now will be, on less money than that. Plenty of people in the UK will be on less money than that every single month and would still be over the threshold to claim legal aid. So, essentially, the people who are being put up rent-free in taxpayer-funded hotels are getting double bubble. Joining me now is both Andrew R.T. Davies, the Welsh Conservative leader, and immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal. Andrew, I'll start with you. I've got a collection of Labour MPs in the Wirral area here who are opposed to a migrant barge off the coast there. They say it's about human rights grounds. I think we all know that it's because their constituents actually wouldn't like it, and maybe, just some would say, they might be being slightly hypocritical about their true beliefs about the migrant crisis. But in Wales, it's worse. £1,600 a month for people who came here illegally, Andrew.
Well, thank you for having me this afternoon, Patrick. I couldn't agree more with the point that you're making. We know that the pull factor is something that we've got to try and stop to make sure the boats stop coming across the channel. We know Germany and France took similar measures to stop that pull factor, and they saw the numbers decrease dramatically. So when you have a devolved government, such as the Welsh Labour government, offering such a big carrot of £1,600, you're creating even a bigger pull factor to bring people across the channel and risk their lives and hand more money over to the people smugglers. And the other thing as well is this particular project that the Welsh Labour government have embarked on would be specific to 18-year-olds, as I understand it. I mean, lo and behold, we haven't been told this as members of the Welsh Parliament, but as I understand it, it's for 18-year-olds. And one of the first things that many people who cross the channel illegally do is obviously destroy their identity papers. So it is difficult to identify the true age of something.
All right. I'm going to throw it over to Harjap now. Harjap, look, when a lot of people say that governments care more about the rights of people just coming here illegally across the channel than they do their own, don't they just have to look at Wales, where the average common man and woman won't be getting £1,600 a month from the government, as well as free accommodation and food, and on top of that, the ability to get legal aid?
Yeah, I think this all stems from the fact that migrants aren't allowed to work. If they could work, they can pay their way, pay their own rent. We wouldn't need the hotels. We wouldn't need to finance them. They can pay their own legal bills. They can pay for their own food. We wouldn't need to provide them with vouchers for shopping. We've got to do something about that. We can't, and that stems from the fact that we can't process their cases quick enough. If we're going to take 2 years to process a case and we're not going to let anyone work to pay their way, then unfortunately we're going to have to fund them. And that's just the way it is. So we haven't got a system which can decide cases in 10, 15 days, which we should have. Other countries decide cases in 21 days or 20 odd days. And the other thing is we've got a backlog already of 160,000. So every day we add to that backlog, no one's going to clear that backlog. We don't let the migrants work. They can't pay their own way.
Oh, yeah, but where's this money coming from, Andrew? I'm sorry, but I thought we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. There will be a lot of old people, for example, in Wales, no doubt, struggling between heating and eating, people right on the breadline. But if you've just decided to leave Wales and go to Calais and get on a dinghy and come back over and find yourself back in the wonderful land of the Welsh, you can get yourself £1,600 a month and legal aid if they try and get you rid of you.
Well, that's a perfectly legitimate question. Where is this money going to come from? I've only dealt with today an issue in North Wales where a community hospital's having to shut a residential ward because of lack of resources and an inability to pay doctors and nurses to staff that ward. And here you have the Welsh Labour government, which is propped up by Plaid Cymru here in Wales, dishing out £1,600 a month to anyone who wants to rock up and, claim it crossing the channel illegally. As I said, it's really important that we draw down these draw factors across the whole country, but in particular here in Wales, so that pull factor isn't there to bring people across the channel in the first place, ultimately handing the criminal gangs vast sums of money to bring people over and endangering people's lives. This isn't about anything else other than trying to stop the illegal immigration into this country of the people traffickers across the channel.
Harjab, it's one thing giving people legal aid, okay? It's another thing also giving them 1,600 quid a month and free accommodation and free food. I understand that you say, well, it's down to them not working, but to be fair, if they're not allowed to work and they're sitting in a hotel every day and they can survive off £1,600 a month, if pensioners who've paid into this system, and in fact, ironically, I interviewed the former head of UK immigration at Border Force, whose pension is less monthly than the amount of money we are giving people who've just come here illegally across the channel. Surely they can survive on that money and not still have to get legal aid, Harjab.
Yeah, I mean, legal aid is means tested. So if your income is zero, you're pretty much going to get legal aid, but only up to a certain amount. So you only get up to about 4 hours work or 5 hours work. It's not a great deal of legal aid, and lawyers don't really get involved until someone's case is refused at appeal stage. But I think with this government claiming that they haven't got any money, and we all know that that's not true because they've got money for certain things, to give their friends for PPE, to spend on test and trace. So they've got billions to spend there, but they haven't got it for the average person. And my dad's pension is less than 1,600 quid. And my mum's pension
How do
is
you
even
feel
less
about
than
that?
So
how do you think about that? Seriously, how do you feel about that? Because this is, ordinary people here, I think, would feel, Harjab, quite a burning sense of injustice.
Yeah, well, this is the government's created problem. Who has been in power for the last 13 years? How has this backlog grown?
In Wales,
it's been under the
it's
Conservatives.
Labour.
Why haven't we deported people? Why have deportations gone down from 60,000 people in 2008 and 2009 to less than 3,000 people last year? 2,800 people. This is a crisis created by this government, and it has to solve it.
Andrew, answer that then, because you are, of course, the Welsh Conservative leader. So respond to that.
Yeah, I think people need to understand where the responsibility lies here. We're talking about a specific project which has been brought forward by the Welsh Labour government, not the Conservatives in Westminster, of paying £1,600 to people who come across the channel. That's what we're talking about here. And if you want to understand what Keir Starmer would be like in government, he said time and time again, look for what we would do in Wales. Look to what we do in Wales where we've been in government. We'd like to do that across the rest of the United Kingdom. So if you're angry about this in other parts of the United Kingdom, this is what could happen if Keir Starmer ever gets the doors to number 10. The keys to the doors are number 10. And it's really important that people understand that this is Mark Drakeford and his Welsh Labour government are proposing to do this. And when you compare it to what pensioners are on and other people who've paid in the pot, ultimately this is the wrong policy, the wrong choice and the wrong priority.
All right, look, both of you, thank you very, very much. There's Andrew R.T. Davies there, who's the Welsh Conservative leader, and immigration lawyer Harjab Singh Bangal. Strong stuff on either side. The emails are absolutely flooding in when it comes to this. Patrick, they can't work because they haven't been processed yet. 1,600 quid is what we give them every single month. That is more than what people get in wages. Give them absolutely nothing, says Adrian. He says also this is Labour for you, and he thinks it will act as a massive pull factor for people. Does it not feel a bit self-defeating? We're saying that, oh, gosh, we want to try to protect the human rights of these people by not making them come and stay in accommodation and barges off the coast of or in the Wirral or whatever, and then we're almost incentivising them to come. It appears to be quite self-defeating. By the way, I am and remain absolutely fascinated by the 3 Labour MPs for Wirral, all of whom we have reached out for contact and all of whom have refused to come on this show, by the way, who are opposed to the idea there's going to be a barge of around 1,800 asylum seekers in their area. They don't want it in their area. They don't want it. But, of course, one would imagine that is not for the reasons that they have potentially given. If you ask me, they've said that it's against these asylum seekers' human rights and they don't want any part of it. I strongly suspect it's because they realise that their own constituents don't want them there. But, of course, I can't put that question to them because they didn't want to talk to me. Anyway, more details now about the King's coronation have been released. I have drawn up a special coronation menu, OK? I want to know your delights as well that you want to put on there. I'm taking all comers here, people, OK? What kind of special foods do you want to see with a royal theme, if we can? Put a royal twist on it. We've already had king prawns, for example, on the big coronation menu. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, Tory MP David Mundell has joined a list of MPs under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog, and this news actually broke again on this show. The group includes Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Matt Hancock. With me now to shed some more light on this is GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. OK, Catherine, so what's going on?
Another one.
Right.
As Brenda from Bristol once said, I think about an elected, not another one. So, yes, Scottish Conservative MP David Mundell, who was Secretary of State for Scotland at one point a few years ago, is under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog. Of course, we had Rishi Sunak announced yesterday under investigation, so David Mundell today. It's a rather less serious charge of use of facilities, brackets, stationery, provided by the public purse. Now, it doesn't mean that he's been pinching envelopes, but it's explicitly forbidden to use House of Commons stationery for anything other than your parliamentary business. God. So we don't know exactly what he's done. That's why it's being investigated. But if he'd been using stationery for some other job, some other purpose, potentially that would be a breach. So this now brings us to 7 either sitting Conservative MPs or previous Conservative MPs who've had the whip suspended from them that are now being investigated by the Standards Commissioner. Right. So, and let's not forget that although we're sort of making light of it a little bit, standards are important because Boris Johnson, it was really Owen Paterson, the Standards trying to get him off, you know, the suspension that started Boris Johnson's troubles, and then it ended with Chris Pincher, which sort of tipped MPs over the edge with that scandal. Yes. So, yeah, I should say it's not just Conservatives. I mean, Keir Starmer was found last year to have breached the standards code because he hadn't declared interest till late. So it's not only a Conservative phenomenon by any means.
No, exactly. I think it's the revelation that it may well involve a misuse of stationery that potentially brought a smile to my face. But, of course, we will have to wait and see exactly what this is. It may well end up being something serious. It may not be at all. We'll have to wait and see. Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster there, our political reporter. Right, OK, so I just wanted to round off the show with something a little bit different. And if you've been lucky enough to have tuned in for the last 2 hours, you will have seen this already. But guess at the Coronation big lunch at Westminster Abbey today was served up the King and Queen Consort's favourite quiche Lorraine. All right? King Charles III, it said, adores anything with eggs and cheese, and the royal family's website describes it as a deep quiche with a crisp, light pastry case and delicate flavours of spinach, broad beans, fresh tarragon. Grief, I'm hungry. Anyway, that sounds absolutely delicious, but what else will be dished up on the big day? And I have put some thought into this. I don't put thought into a lot of stuff, but when it comes to food, I don't mess about, OK? So I thought, here's the Patrick Christys coronation banquet, suitable for a king. Here's what I will go for, so you come round to my gaff for the coronation. You're greeted straight off the bat with a Kir Royale. Nothing like a cocktail to get the taste buds going. Bit of champagne and, of course, a little bit of the old fruit juice in there as well. Next up, they'd get stuck into a starter of coronation chicken salad. Keep it relatively healthy, but also keep it classic, OK? And a nod to the past because of our dear late Queen, whose coronation chicken was named after her or in honour of her. And also, as well, maybe a nod to modern Britain. Yawn, I know, but a nod to modern Britain with the use of curry powder. For the main course, here's the pièce de résistance. It's a fillet of beef Prince Albert. No, get your minds out the gutter. A dish named in honour of the husband of Queen Victoria. Basically, it is a massive hunk of beef, and I would serve that with any sauce you like, preferably a red wine jus, and all of the trimmings. What's not to love? What's not to love? People are pointing out there's not a lot in this so far for the vegetarians. Yeah. So, what better way to round things off than with a dessert of a Victoria sponge? I am going for a thicker layer of the cream icing in the middle than what you're seeing in that particular offering in front of you, but you catch my drift, OK? It's classic, it's simple, it's nice. You cannot beat a good British Victoria sponge. A culinary delight, of course, conjured up during the Victorian era. And may I thank everybody who's been getting in touch with their own desires here. Fish and chips has proved a good one. Paul's been on for that again. I think you should have lobster thermidor, which is a meal properly fit for a king. They've just signed that off, CJ. I am still yet to get over the Donna meat and chips idea that was served up to me, for want of a better phrase, earlier on. I mean, if he really wants to be a man of the people, I suppose King Charles could tuck into it. Would he have to get the garlic sauce on it? Of course he could. I used to have a kebab shop near where I used to live that had a 0 out of 5 food hygiene rating, so you know it's good. And it used to do a thing called sexy chips, which was just cheese with chips with cheese on. So there you go. Anyway, Michelle Dewberry's here. Jubes and Co's up next. You all right?
Yeah, I bet you must have used some toilet roll when you was living next to that kebab shop with a 0 out of 5 rating. Should we gloss over that, though?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. The amount of booze I'd consumed by that point in the evening, though, I think just pickled me, so it was all right.
Did it?
It was all right.
Can I show the viewers what's at my feet?
Very quick. Oh, it's the massive satchel.
Can I? Anyone that was watching this the other day...
Yeah, go on, you get it.
I dread to think what's in here. Hang on. This is what I was referring to. Look at the size of that. This is what I was saying about Patrick's satchel.
Patrick's massive
It's
satchel.
almost as big as me.
It is.
I'm not going to rummage. I don't know what he carries in it. I don't want to know.
No, I'd get sacked for that. Anyway, all right, Michelle. Well, anyway, you've spoken enough about my satchel and not enough about your show, but people are going to have to tune in and find out. Up next, Michelle Dewberry. I'll see you tomorrow at 3.
Hello there, welcome to a weather update from the Met Office. I'm Claire Nazir. Warm in the west over the next 24 hours. By day, not tonight, under clear skies, always cooler, and always cooler along the eastern side. We do have a squeeze on the isobars across more eastern parts of the country, and that's delivering some cold air to these areas, and also some cloud from time to time. Certainly that will be the case as we head through Tuesday night and into Wednesday. A few very residual showers possible across the far south overnight into Wednesday morning. Clearer skies elsewhere, and again it will be cold along this western side. In shelter in the Glens of Scotland, temperatures dipping down close to freezing. A chilly start to the day, but it will be a bright one, yet again with some sunshine. Always more cloud along this east coast here, but that will tend to break up through the morning on Wednesday, and some brighter skies to start the day across more central southern parts of England and Wales. As any showers fade away, we'll see some sunshine coming through towards the west there. So it's a day of sunshine in the north, cloud and sun in the south as well as the southwest, and again that nagging easterly wind keeping temperatures here 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, but the mid to high teens in shelter across the western side of Scotland helped with that sunshine. So that's a picture on Wednesday through Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. It's another clear night. The winds pick up across most parts, but again, as it hops over the Highlands, you will see some warmer air across the western side